Before we begin, in the spirit of reconciliation and respect, the InkGuild acknowledges that we live, work, and play on the traditional Treaty 7 territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Kainai, as well as the Stoney Nakoda and Tsuut'ina nations. This territory is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all Indigenous and non-Indigenous to honor and celebrate this territory alongside us.
I know we've been looking for a kind of good solar system map to use as referential things, but this one's really nice.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty nice.
I think Jupiter's colored really fucking wrong, though.
Why is it like the trans flag?
They aren't wrong.
Yes! Jupiter says trans rights!
Yes!
Lee, Jupiter is now a trans god in setting.
I was about to suggest it. I'm down for it.
I'm
Let's
down
go.
for it.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah. Hello everybody.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi!
Hey there.
Bonjour.
Hello, everybody.
Welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. Just go to fucking therapy.
Don't correct me. I don't care.
Need to start a revolution.
I'm going to fucking explode if I don't say this by now.
I brought you to this podcast. I can take you out.
I'm going to summon up his spirit to fix all of this up for me.
You didn't have good enough tea and/or comic books, so.
And you know what? I'm gonna say it.
All of them are fucking idiots.
Everyone is taking cocaine.
Just say your morning routine.
Big robot. Oh, I can die and make Victor break out his Hoover vacuum for you to call her the girl that turned to ash.
Finally, his swordfish was free.
Oh, I forgot what I was.
You get distracted by Gabe.
Hello everybody. Welcome back to the InkGuild podcast. I'm Dean, joined tonight by Alex.
Hello.
Gabe.
Hello.
Tyler.
Bonjour.
And Lee.
Yo.
Also, Marie-Soleil is listening in. Marie-Soleil, if you want to say hello.
Hi.
So, tonight, to kick off Season 7 of the InkGuild podcast, we are stepping into the InkGuild Multiverse. To kind of explain the title of that, we, on the first season of the InkGuild podcast, did an episode on world building, where it was me, Alex, and Gabe speaking on our various worlds. I spoke of Illyria, in brief detail, outlining the races, the cultures, some significance there, but nothing really kind of concrete. Alex, I believe you outlined mostly Katariana.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and then Gabe, you outlined... What was the name of your thing? What was the name of your full world again? Because it was the... Ylldrix, sorry, yeah. So
Which I'm doing again.
Mm-hmm. So, that was all the way back in Season 1, and kind of acknowledging the obvious fact that we now have some more InkGuild members since then, and because many of you will be engaging with our content for the first time, we wanted to kind of reintroduce ourselves and our creative worlds to all of you. So, with the timestamps in the description, you will get a sense of who will be speaking when, and I'll be going first. Then it will be Gabe, then it will be Lee, then it will be Alex, and then it will be Tyler. But with all of that being said, it's now time to step in, starting with Illyria. So Illyria is the main setting for my story, Xeno. I've spoken about Illyria and specifically the characters within it, Porter and Magna, for many podcast episodes now. Regardless of what we were talking about, I wanted to always connect back to it, because it is the home of main characters Porter and Magna, as well as a whole bunch of other goings on in that countries. So if I will just take my map here for reference, and let me point out some more significant things. So I will just have the map flash up on screen right now. Give me a second.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Incroyable.
That's a hot map right there.
Okay.
Yeah, the
so-
unhinged wasn't over. I lied.
Okay, thank you. Just had to send a text, but yes. So Illyria, for many for many people sounds kind of familiar, and that is because it is the setting of 12th Night in Shakespeare, which is, again, because this is a reintroduction, I want to talk a little bit about the country itself. Illyria is inspired by and takes a lot of inspiration from 12th Night, as you can see based on the map from its names, or from its country names, like just the general name of Illyria itself. And that's really kind of it. Like, the connection between the Illyria in my story and the Illyria in 12th Night kind of ends there. Between the five notable countries of Illyria, there is Orsino, Amari, Belch, Bastion, and Viola. The people within Orsino refer to themselves as Orsinians, Amari, Amarians, Belch, Belchers, Bastions, and Viola, Violins. In some quick history about the continent itself, or about the countries and the continent itself, the continent was founded originally as a bigger continent, but it is because of the central volcano in the center of the map, where there is overlooking a giant where there is a giant lake at the center of it, that caused a massive explosion that caused a bunch of the surrounding areas within the country to basically fall into the water. I haven't written that within the country, or within the canon yet, but it is the formation of Illyria as we know it, or as I know it at least. The shape, so basically the shape that Illyria is right now is not its original shape. It used to be a much bigger country, or it used to be a much bigger continent, but largely the country itself, or largely the 5 countries itself, have always been the same because of its 5 original kings and queens. There was King Orsino, Queen Amari, King Belch, King Bastion, and Queen Viola. Each founded their own respective country and has since carried over their legacy in the years, or in the decades and ages to come, basically. And some other notable spots before I kind of get into some of the more specifics about the country itself is if you can see from the map, Orsino is a little bit too big, and that is because I'm just trying to find another area basically for that last little bit there, which I'm still kind of working on. So I acknowledge that this map is a little bit outdated. The Ascension Summit at the top of the continent is a place that is significant for story reasons, but I will not speak too much on that. And then Bastion is actually split up into 2 separate countries, or at least it was for quite a long time. There was the East and the West, which plays a pretty big part throughout the story that takes place within Illyria. And with that being said, to kind of close off my discussion on the continent itself, Illyria is positioned within the continent, or within the planet that I have Vuhin. It is along where Canada and the UK would be, so it's in the northern hemisphere of the planet. So while sharing a lot of familiarity with those regions, there is a lot of snow, there's a lot of forests. In the center of the continent is Nui Illyria, which basically just means which is just the big volcano there. It is currently extinct, and that is because of that great final explosion that wiped off many of Illyria's surrounding landmass. in the center of that lake, and what is in the center of the Illyrian mountain range is Loch Bianfa, which is a lake with special bioluminescent algae that glows once every year, I believe during the summer season, where basically it is this beautiful glow that can be seen instantly when you're near enough, or when you're near it. As a result of the as a result of the volcano exploding, the leftover landmass the leftover crater that was there resulted in that lake forming. There are also many different individual lakes and rivers going through the country, and many of it leads out into the ocean. There isn't any kind of like landlocked lake or river. All of it just kind of funnels in between the ocean, but that is largely out of date. I'm still kind of developing the actual look of the continent itself. But before I kind of specify a bit more of like the different countries, what do we think? What do you guys think?
I have a question.
Yes.
I also have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the map here, I am wondering on scale, because you said this is a much smaller chunk of a larger continent that was lessened because of Big Boom.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, what scale are we dealing with? If I wanted to go from the tippy tip point all the way down to the city of Fall there, how long would that take? What are, like, the travel methods and stuff?
From the very top of Ascension Summit down to the city of Fall, I believe that would be a 12 to 14 hour drive.
Okay.
Yeah,
So we're talking like size of tippy top of Yukon down to bottom of BC.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
In terms of scale, the current continent right now is on par with the size of the UK.
Okay.
Obviously factoring out Ireland, but like just that central continent itself is what current Illyria looks like. Like if you consider the larger chunk of the continent itself, it would be more like it would be just smaller than it would be a little bit smaller than the size of actual Europe. So it used to be a very massive country, but because of that giant explosion, the sliver of what was left is all that is.
How dare you blow up Europe and leave Britain behind? Just blow up Britain, dude. Sorry. That's my one joke.
Oh, well, shit, I need to do some revising now.
Blow up Britain, leave everything else. Go ahead, Alex. I know you had a question.
Oh, I was just curious because you said it was named after places like Illyria coming from the Shakespeare play. I was curious if you knew Illyria was a real place.
I did, but
Okay.
I know nothing of the actual place. So I was just like, oh, Illyria from Shakespeare. This is easy association.
Fair enough. I know lots of other people have also used it as like a name in fictional places. So,
Hey, there's a city named Paris and London on every single continent in this world. Humans are allowed to reuse names.
yeah, no, I wasn't saying that. I was just curious if.
I know.
It's a fun fact for anyone who didn't know. Illyria was a real place in Earth's history.
Yeah.
London wasn't. It's been lies the whole time. Your history teachers are lying to you.
London's not a real place?
London's not a real place. I don't believe in the British.
It won't be a real place when I'm done with it.
I'll do a great start.
Yes, welcome to season 7, everyone. So yeah, any other comments about the continent itself before I kind of specify more of the region?
Why explosion?
I don't know. I just figured when I was developing the country, I wanted to have some kind of justification for the giant volcano in the center of it, because again, for those who are looking at it, it is very Bionicle-esque looking. So I was like, hey, I might as well have some kind of illusion there, or like some kind of reference to it. So I added in a giant volcano. But then I was thinking,
volcanoes just exist.
well, yeah, and like the thing is, if I was to include a giant volcano there, even if I said it was extinct.
Do you mean dormant?
No, extinct.
Extinct?
Extinct is it's a correct term. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Okay.
It didn't step beyond dormant. Yeah.
Yeah. So because it's extinct, I wanted to have some kind of thing, like history-wise, some kind of point where it did blow up. And I don't know why I was very Chekhov's gun about the whole thing, but just... So, yeah, like the reason for the big boom was that was just to kind of justify the need for the volcano, right? And that in itself ties into a whole bunch of other lore reasons, which I haven't really explained in the canon yet, but just, yeah. Like, I wanted big volcano, so big volcano do big damage.
Good. That's what I want. Yep. Mm-hmm. Big boom. Good.
Big boom. Mm-hmm.
I'm sounding like an orc. Please continue before I devolve further.
Okay. So, so that is Illyria, the continent. I have spoken about the races itself, as well as the kind of like the general vibe of each of each country in previous places before, but just to kind of refresh or like kind of explain it in just a few sentences before I move on to some more specific stuff. Orsino is a very technology heavy province, certainly more or I'll kind of do like quick like fun facts about each one. Orsino is a very technology focused country. It's definitely a lot more advanced compared to some of the other neighboring countries that are there, and that's not to say that like the rest of the countries are underdeveloped per se, but there's just a heavier influence on technology and engineering within Orsino. Within Amari, it's always been focused because of its kind of natural flatlands and somewhat decent weather patterns for farming, and that farming has led to a very notable culinary thing, very culinary heavy presence, which is very apparent when you first start reading the few pages of Xeno. Belch is also Belch is also very like agriculturally wonderful, I think. But wherein Amari and Belch, like the difference between Amari and Belch is like Belch is very like there's a lot of presence more with like alcoholic drinks and more desserts rather than compared to Amari's more like savory palate. And Belch was the site of a very big catastrophe within the lore of the story, which I have not gotten into yet, but just Viola is a very like mountainous region. Like there are rolling hills off near the west of the country. But there's also great forests, and it's also one of the countries that is very close to the Illyrian mountain range at the center, and there is a very strong emphasis there on like elegance and class and a bit of a class disparity, but I haven't really kind of elaborated on that yet. And with Bastion, because it's there, like it used to be two separate provinces because of what's the word? I can't let's just say religious tension, which is echoing the conflicts between the northern and southern Ireland, which is kind of what my focus has been there. Through peace, through like recent peace treaties, there has been some conflict resolution, but again, recent events have kind of like within the canon of the story, it's not doing too well. But Among them, the some of the more notable cities, or like the capital city of each one, does not have a specific name, like how in Alberta we have Edmonton, which I still don't understand. Within within BC, it's Vancouver, but with each of these countries, it's just called the capital. So if you're going to visit the capital of if you're going to visit the capital of Orsino, you're going to the capital of Orsino. There's no designated name for it. But that being said, everything else that I have kind of referred to in terms of the races, the specifics, the weapons, the magic systems, all of which I've spoken on podcasts before. And rather than kind of like rephrasing all of that here for all of you, I just implore you to have a taste of it yourself. What I will try to focus on now, because I certainly don't want to, just rephrase the things that I've been saying already, is two things: the architecture and the food, because those two things have been really, really, really fun to do in terms of world building. So the architecture of each country kind of differs, but doesn't really ever thing. But it's also very like unique to the Illyrian identity, despite them being different countries. Orsino's, because it is a very technology heavy thing, because there's a very strong technological focus within Orsino, I haven't written the full city down completely, but it's very like futuristic, almost cyberpunky, but like not to the levels of cyberpunk dystopia. Like it's clear it's like very modern thing, modern advanced society kind of deal, if that's kind of helping with like visualizing anything. Amari is, when I designed the capital of Amari, I kind of thought as a cross between Calgary and San Francisco. So you have rolling hills, you have like a very like I don't want to say I don't know how to describe it, but just like there's raising levels of like buildings, of locations. It's also like the capital itself is a port city, so that means it's close enough to the ocean. Belch and Bastion kind of share a architectural focus in that everything is very, how do I say this? Like it's a nice blend of current modern architecture mixed with reminders of their thing, with reminders of their past. So you have stone castles, you have like the ruins of stone castles, you have like ancient ruins in general, dig sites, museums, and basically just like a lot of like emphasis on culture. And with Viola, because it is more emphasis, like because it's associated as a very like high elegance country, there's a lot of like like towering spires and like buildings made out of like very like beautiful materials, and it all looks very gorgeous. Most of which, again, I haven't really written down yet, but it's just kind of like within my mind to implement all of that. Through the little bits that I've talked about with Zeno describing the architecture, I always try to like focus on like, and this may be a minor spoiler for those who eventually do end up reading Zeno, but just like the first few pages, or like the second chapter alone, introduces like the capital of Amari in its entirety. So you have like a bunch of food, you have a bunch of like the different like castle, like you have the like architecture descriptions, a lot of emphasis on like Amarian culture, the culinary focus, which I will get to in a minute, but just yeah, like the architecture has been something that has been really, really, really fun to kind of like emphasize a bit more, especially because when you think world building, you're thinking like characters, races, weapons, magic systems. But like to me, at least, that's what I used to think of it. But building actual buildings and considering what everyone is eating, how everyone is resting, like that's been so fun. So yeah, before I get into the the food aspect of it, to kind of like close off my section, any comments?
InkGuild cooking episode where we cook things from our various worlds. When?
God, that sounds so fun.
You have a lot of interesting architecture spread around, but you've used several terms interchangeably, which is where I'm going to ask a clarifying question because I may have just missed it. So Illyria is a country, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then these are different provinces?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just clarifying question on my part because I was a little confused at like whether Illyria was the continent or the country is all.
Yeah, no, it's the country. Sorry for the confusion. Yeah, it's the country itself and then the different provinces within it.
Okay, I was also confused about that.
Yeah.
So, question. Who is ruling the country? Is it like the kings and queens ruling their provinces and then one head honcho? Or did they die out a while ago? Because it sounds like it's a fairly modern country. I haven't interacted with it before, so...
Family monarchies.
Okay.
So you have one family at the... It's kind of interesting because you have a family in power very akin to like the royal family, but those can be... Like the said royal family can be democratically elected, right? So you kind of just like pick and choose which family is going to be running everything. Which is an interesting take that I haven't really talked about before, but yeah, like within Orsino, Viola, Bastion, so within the 5 provinces, each one is run by a family monarchy. And each one kind of like within the canon of Xeno, and I think Tyler, you've read that. Each one's kind of going through some shit right now.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah. And like that in itself, like I don't know why I haven't really specified more of that actually. Just like the individual governments that are each running the provinces, I really need to think about just how influential they are, because like that in itself, like a family monarchy that is up to democratic election every so and so years. Why am I not talking about that more often? Because like
it's a monarchy that's elected,
or a thing, like it's like a thing. It's like a thing. It's just like a president. So you know, it's a certain thing. It's a certain like person like in this case family and their team of officials running the thing. I say monarchy just because you know they refer to themselves as king, queen, prince, princess.
This sounds like a very interesting political system.
Which
I was about to say,
yeah,
like that's really cool, but you have a lot of like room for them just like being absolutely dicks to each other, and I love it.
Mm-hmm. And I think there might be more of an emphasis on that when I get to writing my second book, but that is again in itself kind of, I don't know. There's just more of a focus right now on the main characters of Xeno so far, rather than focusing on everything else around them yet, which I acknowledge is not really tapping into the full potential that I have with this country, like with this province, or like with this country. And I'm certainly not trying to like eat my own ass when I'm saying any of these things, but just like, yeah, as I kind of speak it now, that's something really interesting that I need to tap into a little bit more. But I think the one thing that I really have tapped into, and to kind of like close off my section of, you know, of the multiverse, is food. I've really taken a liking to describing colors and describing food within Xeno, and the food has been some of the most fun things that like I've written, and it comes from like a few like little things to like full meals to snacks to like restaurant chains to thing. I don't like there's such a nice, in my opinion, emphasis on just how vibrant the world is based on its food, because you can you can associate a lot of different countries nowadays with the food that you have, or like with the food that comes out of that country. So I don't know, something about something about like just describing food has just been super, super fun lately. And I'm going to read like a few of my favorite excerpts from my current manuscript. So it may still be there, but just keep in mind that a lot of these things are drafts. So whether or not it stays there or not, I'm just sharing for, the purpose of the story. So,
you mean you don't have a finished product yet?
Not yet. I'm still writing it.
Dean, I'm waiting. Please.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to quickly read off a section of a thing. I'm going to quickly read off a section from a bit later in the story, near chapter 23, out of context, and just kind of get your guys' opinion on it, and just kind of describe more of like why I love talking about food. So with a smile, Porter takes the pair of bags labeled Tina Pies, named after the famous Belcher-born Himnick baker, and heads out of the store. Close to 7:40, she watches the overhead streetlights switch on, despite the sky still flushed in a soft rust and honey hue. Locals and visitors from across Illyria drive past them on the highway, heading into the city of Igni, about 10 minutes away from them. Magna's still asleep, her head pressed against the shoulder of the chair and her body facing the door. Reaching the driver's seat, Porter takes an ensaimada roll from the bag, placing the rest of them on the back seat. Hopping into the driver's seat, she unwraps her food as she starts the car. With a free hand, Porter checks the map of northern Illyria, checking the road through the mountains towards Ganai. Tucking the map away, she drives onto the highway, taking a bite of the roll and careful not to spill any of the excess sugar coating and loose pieces of cheese. She chews slowly, enjoying the sweet and savory flavors as much as she could. It wasn't perfect, with a little too much sugar and an almost stale toughness to the bread. Still, she'd been starved for it for so long that she savored this nonetheless. The last time she had one, much less the perfect one, was years ago. So, yeah.
Sugar and cheese?
Yeah, so an ensaimada is an actual Filipino treat. It is a pastry with a thing with the top coated with sugar and like loose pieces of cheese or string cheese. Pieces of like shredded cheese. It's delicious.
Mm-hmm. Cheese and sugar?
Mm-hmm.
Are you blown my mind?
It's wonderful. I should like introduce it to you sometime, Tyler. It's very tasty.
Lee, you were speaking.
I was about to say, I really like how it grounds the characters further into the world that they're in.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, good point, because like you could totally just throw people in being like, oh, I've never had this before, and use that as an excuse to describe your food. But no, Lee, you're totally right. The way you talk about Porter having them before and referencing memories, you're right, very grounding.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. As another one of my favorite like examples of this, and this is maybe just my own thing, but just I'll give myself a little pat on the back for this because like I really liked writing this part, but this is on the journey to Ganai, which is basically Porter and Magna's next destination. In the corner of her eye, Magna emerges from the store, her arms pressed against her as a chill glides across the air. Collecting herself, hoping her stare doesn't concern Magna, Porter grabs her water from the cup holder at her hip, taking a brief swig. She reaches into the bag of snacks, taking her bag of Spirit Bomb energy gummies and tearing into the packaging. She pops a couple of the multicolored bombs into her mouth, a syrup tingling with sweet peach and fresh violin nectarines coating her tongue. She pops in a couple more, hoping the energy keeps her awake on their way to Igni. So, yeah, it's been really fun writing different food.
Hold on, you have caffeine gummy bears? You have caffeine gummy bears?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have those in real life too?
Okay, so the process behind that was I was originally thinking, I'm like, okay, so they have coffee, but I don't think they have energy drinks. They have tea, but I don't think they have any kind of, they have coffee and tea, but they don't have any like sugary energy drinks. So how do I kind of write that into the world? And so I thought of things. So I thought of like, caffeine gummies, which I think which I think exists, but like I've certainly not ever known of ones that are very like, how do I say this, like monster-esque, where they're very like bright and colorful and very tasty. And that's kind of where I base the Spirit Bomb gummies off of. It's just like a can of Monster. Like it's very bright, there's a lot of flavor to it, but it also like kicks you in the ass when it comes to all of the energy that you get. So
firstly, I was very skeptical about sugar and cheese. Not sure where the board lies on that myself. But Monster energy drink candies, that would be a very interesting concept. That is cool.
Thank you. Sorry, Alex, what was that?
I googled it because I was curious. It looks like there are a few.
Oh, are there really?
There's something called Punched Energy. They look pretty colorful. I don't know how good they are, but like...
Regardless. Dope stuff.
Yeah.
Good food.
Mm-hmm.
Food good?
Mm-hmm. Food good, yeah. One of my favorite things, like while writing, is, I've just been writing like food, and again, to kind of start closing down my section of the multiverse, it's been really fun, like taking what many consider in like certain fantasy stories, at least the ones that I've read, have been like, okay, yeah, they're eating now. Like, yeah, they're eating now. Now they're going to move on. But then it's usually just like nothing ever really descriptive, right? And I guess maybe just it doesn't always have to be. But for me, like the food and the architecture has been a bigger focus than I originally intended it to be, because that really tells a lot about the country itself and how they kind of carry themselves. Like, you don't have to overly describe like the kingdoms and the rulers within it, or at least that's not what I'm doing. And you're just instead describing like the day-to-day goings on of the citizens by what they eat, by what they see, by how the character kind of like, by how the main characters interact with all of it. Like, I think that's how, like, that's a good formula for my story, at least. And like, it's been hella fun just coming up with like different influences and different ingredients. Like, I wrote like writing Porter's dinners has been hella fun. So yeah.
One note I wanted to say, because you were talking about like how there's no description of food and stuff like that. I have a counter, but it serves to strengthen your own writing. George R.R. Martin describes food way too fucking much. Like, I say he describes everything way too much because it's true. I don't need pages about the fucking 5-course meal these nobles are having. I don't care enough. However, a little bit of description like you've done is like the perfect amount, because guess what? It's a taste of the food. You're not having the meal. That's not why you're reading the book.
Mm-hmm.
See, I associate food as like a staple of like high fantasy in particular. I don't know how true it is, but I just like, that's how I associate it in my mind. I personally am not a fan of food in books because I don't like food, but that's just a me thing. So
I was I saw you mute up there during Dean's reading, and I was wondering if you were doing all right.
Yeah, are you okay?
No, I'm fine. I'm just not a food person.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Well, I'd hope you were a person, but anyways.
Mm-hmm. Oh my god.
Wait, you don't eat people?
A person.
I'm like, based on context, that comes across with a very weird meaning.
I transformed my intelligence with anatomy into the culinary arts.
Okay.
I was more thinking I'm made of salad and burgers, but yeah. I just woke up, so.
Good morning.
That'd be a fun
morning.
For context,
Shit.
it's 8:00 at night as we're recording this.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that is my little slice of Illyria. I know I haven't really described the people so much as, because, it's obvious like that the people kind of help populate the country, but just I've spoken on those ones already, and I will honestly do my best to kind of like assemble all of this, like, a montage of like all the times that I have, but like I'm not gonna do that. I know myself, I'm not gonna do that. This episode releases on Friday. I don't fucking have time or want to make it. Yeah. that's Illyria. The thing, just a very... Thank you, Tyler. So, as I will inevitably explain a little bit more about in regards to Illyria in future episodes, I will now wind down and pass it over to Gabe to go over Ylldrix.
Before I talk about Ylldrix, I want to say one quick thing about Illyria.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone else mentioned it. I left for like a hot second, but I really, really appreciate that the region that you noted as being noteworthy for its alcohol consumption is called Belch.
Gabe, have you ever read 12th Night?
No.
There's a reason for it.
Oh, okay. I don't read Shakespeare.
I'm assuming.
There's too many words.
Nope. Yeah, you two got it. Thank you.
I wanted to make a joke about it, but like I knew the reference was there, so I decided to lay off.
Mm-hmm.
I've never read the only Shakespeare I've ever read is The Lion King.
Don't talk. Don't interact, Gabe. Just go into your world, Bill. Damn it.
Okay, I'm gonna talk about Ylldrix. I don't know where to start. I had a plan. I was gonna be all like explanatory about it. I'm just gonna start going where I start going. I just have a Google Doc and I'm just gonna read off it. How's that sound? How's that sound to you?
Go ahead.
How many words is the Google Doc? Hold on, you guys are agreeing to something way too blind. How big is the Google Doc?
I'm not gonna read the whole thing.
Just agree. Do it, Gabe. Go.
All right, fine. Do it.
So, I have talked about the races of Ylldrix in a past episode. I think it's possible that it happened, but I don't remember it, so I'm gonna do it anyway. So the races of Ylldrix are before I get into all these different countries, and Dean, if you can flash up the map for a second. Flash the map
Flash
up.
out. I've been playing too much.
Show the map. Show the map. Put the map up.
Yeah, right there. Oh my god.
Wow.
These are all.
Yeah, look at that map.
Anyway, these are all countries, and there's stuff going on in all of them, and I'm going to get to that. But first, I want to talk about races. So the first race is human people, just regular old human people, except there's not exactly a whole lot to say about human people. They are human people. I wanted to talk about the magic system, however, I deferred that I'm going to wait to elaborate on my updated magic system in the weapons episode, because magic is mostly used for combat in this planet. But human people in Ylldrix are basically magic is not a rare ability. Basically everyone has magic in some form or another. All humans do anyway. Other races also have magic, but it's different magic. I'll explain in the weapons episode. The second race I want to talk about are elves. Elves are significantly rarer than people, and they're elves. They are elves. If you're familiar with elves, that's them. They're the elves. And I'll explain them more when I get to the elf country, the elf island, the elf Isla, if you will. The third race I want to talk about, and the one that I've enjoyed talking about in the past, and I'm gonna good goddamn enjoy talking about it more here, is vampires. The vampires of Ylldrix, which I'm very happy with. So vampires in Ylldrix are not. They're a little different. They're a little wacky. They're a little goofy. So if you look on the map, there's that big section in the top right corner called Titania, and I'll explain more about their politics when I get to the map description. But vampires essentially all come from this area. It's known as the Vampire Nation. It's extremely cold, and due to the extremely hostile environment of this country, vampires basically evolved into being, and they're vampires, and they do vampire stuff. And the fourth race is sort of a subset of vampires. They're called the Marrowkin, and there's not much that's different about them except that they do, instead of blood stuff, they do bone stuff. They got wacky bones. The fifth race are the Culvins, and the Culvins are super interesting. They come from this like top left corner island here called Volca, and the Culvins are essentially a composite life form. I'm not using that word right. They're like genetically engineered people, essentially, who are genetically engineered by these guys right next to Lancaster as soldiers in old wars. And then once the wars were done, they were just like, okay, well, we're done with you guys now, so we're gonna dump you all on this volcano island. And so they kind of live there now. It's sort of separate from the rest of Lancaster. They're just a bunch of big, sort of orc-like dudes who are mostly just like chilling out, having a blast on the volcano island. The fifth race the sixth race is the Bosparek, who are sort of like furries.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They're like people, but they evolved a little differently. Oh shit! I didn't even get to one of the other races. I completely skipped over them. There's also a race called the Navari, and the Navari are they're basically lizard folk essentially, but the Navari are very prominent. They come from this like bottom left region called the marshlands. They're just people who evolved from lizards. They're like lizard dudes. They're really cool. They're like, a lot of them are like, I don't know, they're into like crime and stuff. They're fucking cool. They're like lizard dudes. They got like scales and shit. And the final race is a sort of race called the Thomist. The Thomist don't come from any region specifically, and they're not. I say race is questionable because like they're not exactly a race. It's more like a curse that just sort of happens. Some people are sort of born with the Thomian curse, which like makes them look all they got like horns. They're like they're like tieflings, except they don't have tails, and they're not like they're very weak, but they're like little devil looking dudes, and they're cursed, and they're called the Thomist.
Okay, so like God, did I have to resist speaking? You've got bone vampires and furries?
Yes. Also, I'm loosey goosey. If you want to jump in and talk at any time, you go right ahead. I'm
trying to control the unhinged. You've described the racist, so the next question I have to ask is: do you have any hybrid species mixed between your definitive races, or is that a no bueno?
So there are a couple of hybrids. Some of them it doesn't really work. The Bosparek and the Navari just evolved from like different things than humans did, so they can't really like interact in that way. And like humans, Navari and Bosparek can't interact in that way. I mean, like, you know, some of them certainly try, but there's no reproduction, if that makes any sense.
Oh, so we don't get any bone furries? Damn.
There are no bone furries.
Boo. I have to say, I love your like naming system. There's a volcano. It's called Volca.
Yeah.
Top tier. That's how you should do it.
Now, I have a more serious question than the bone furry stuff.
Go for it.
Looking at your map design, I know you've mentioned and drawn back to the map about different ethnic regions. I'm noticing two that really stand out, which you spoke about a little bit in the pre-intro, which is Aegis and Glassiver. So there's also the Teardrop Isle there, Babel, but regardless, those three areas in specific look, to some extent, from like a map design standpoint, manufactured. So like they wouldn't be naturally geographically processed into these shapes. Is there a greater reason for their shapes, or is it a product of some really fucked up tectonic plate movement and stuff? Or did somebody literally build these?
So in the case of Glassiver, yes. In the case of Aegis, it's because I prioritize making it look cool and interesting over making it make geographical sense. I may update the map to make that make more geographical sense, but there's no. I don't have a good enough reason for Aegis looking like that. But Glassiver, I do have a reason for it looking like that. Essentially, Glassiver is basically entirely manufactured. I'm just gonna use this as the French call it, a segue into my country descriptions.
Jesus fucking Christ! Well, if other people have questions, let them ask first.
Yes. Ask your questions first before I explain Glassiver, and then transition into the other countries and stuff.
Are there any two like groups of people that just like are really tight allies or like really bitter enemies?
Yes.
Like, yeah. Sorry.
Oh wait, no, wait. Sorry, what were you gonna say? You were gonna say more stuff?
I was gonna say because like a rivalry between the bone vampires and the blood vampires would be something I would love to see.
That'd be so sick, yeah.
Or even if they were just like bros, because like, yo, you want the blood, I want the bones. Let's go murder everyone else. That'd be amazing.
So, essentially, in like the history of Ylldrix, there has been like rivalries between the Marrowkin and regular vampires. By the point in time that like the first book is set in, that's no longer the case, and they're like very tight. Mostly because the vampires who were tight, and I'm going to explain more about like how the politics work in Titania, but the vampires who were tight with the Marrowkin ate the government people who were not cool with the bone vampires.
I love it. Okay, amazing. That's a good way to deal with it.
However, a less solved rivalry is the prominently human country of Lancaster and the prominent vampire country of Titania have been in a sort of Cold War, sort of actual war for like the last 500 years.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? Like if it's
they've been sorry,
go ahead.
Dean, continue.
No, go ahead.
I basically at one point in time the Titania and Lancaster went at war with each other. It's been so long now that most people have like sort of forgotten, including me, the writer. Isn't that fun? But it has gone back and forth between a Cold War and an actual war. Most of it taking place like not really in the countries. Like they've never been on full scale war with each other, but there have been like a lot of problems between the two countries, and it has less to do with the human and vampire-ness of the two countries and more to do with Lancaster being very much like a capitalist dystopia, and Titania being like vampire communists.
All right, so I got one last question, but this one's for the whole group. Are y'all Bone Boy vampires or Blood Boy vampires? Team Blood or Team Bone? What say you?
Just for the sheer novelty, I want to see what a bone vampire is. I'm all over that. Let's go.
Seconded.
I'm inclined to agree because I feel like it'd be less. It's probably not, but it feels like it'd be less messy.
It's so not.
I thought
It's definitely noisier.
It's
like,
so much worse.
You have to like deglove things to get to their bones, and even if it's just marrow, like they must have some like either drills or crazy long teeth.
Yeah,
Like-
but blood is like, yeah, I don't know. I have problems with liquids, so neither sound appealing.
Valid.
Trad Blood Boy over here. The rest of you can go bone yourselves. All right, I'm done.
Musical number with the bone vampires looking like a spooky, scary skeletons video. I don't know where that came to mind. Sorry, go ahead, Gabe.
Does anyone have any more questions about the various races of Ylldrix before I move on to the countries of Ylldrix?
Jesus Christ, it started raining like crazy here. Sorry
Oh,
if you
no.
can hear that.
I can't hear anything.
I can't either.
I'm glad I closed my window. Continue.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm gonna start with Glass Ivor because that was the question Tyler. That was the one Tyler was asking about. So Glass Ivor is one of the 3 countries on Ylldrix that still has a monarchist government. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but whatever. There's they have what a base sort of a monarchy. Glass Ivor is basically a what it originally started as a coven of witches that formed their own that like split off from their country of origin and took what was basically a glacier, rose it from the ocean in the form that they could, and then like use magic to make it like a more of a landmass than a glacier. So under the land and stuff, it's just ice. And then there's like a very gothic witch country above it. And is ruled by a coven of witches and warlocks known as the Hornraven family. I haven't really worked out a lot of their politics yet. I haven't worked out many of like the deeper politics besides Lancaster, Titania, and Aegis, mostly because they're less relevant. But Glass Ivor is very witch like. They're very witch like. It's like a witch monarchy, which sounds like a contradiction, but that's like that's what's going on there. So I'm just reading the thing about the tornado warning, and I'm going to ignore it.
Tornado warning.
Yeah.
Apparently,
I didn't get that.
I didn't get one either.
Also, I don't think witch monarchy sounds contradictory.
Good. I was worried it might. Like just like I've had that idea for so long, and just now I was like, that might go against itself a little bit. Anyway, their Glass Ivor is all witches, and in their northern continent is the marshlands, which is where the Navari come from. Despite appearances, the Navari are not products of witch magic. They're just lizard dudes who were fish in the ocean, and then they were lizards, and then they were people, and then they were all over the place very quickly. Yeah. I wish I had drawings of them. I wish I could draw anthropomorphic characters, but once I can, I will show one of them because one of them is my like favorite character in the whole series. Anyway, I'm gonna move on to right directly above Glass Ivor, the country Sea Mason, which is the second very monarchist country. Although this one sucks. This one's shit. Sea Mason is essentially a extremely zealous religious country ruled by a family called the Clover family, they're highly religious. They're like very strict on like magic use in their country, and they're sort of like they're not at war with anyone, but they're dickheads, and everyone sort of tolerates it because they haven't gone to war with anyone, but they just know that they just kind of suck. They're like America. Anyway, I'm gonna keep going. So, anyway, if anyone has anything, just like shout out. I haven't gotten to like the big ones yet. I'm going to save those for my last 3 things to talk about because I have the most about them. Diabel is. Oh wait, I'm going to talk about the last monarchist. That's this little country right in the square in the middle here called Babel. I have done none world building about them yet, but they're a monarchist nation run by a clan of mages called the Whiteward clan, or the Whiteward family. I don't know why I dropped the family naming scheme just now. They're the Whiteward family, and they're there. They're like, they are there. They're like they're very prominent because they have like lots of money and stuff, but they're not like, yeah, I don't know. I already talked, and I think I already said everything that there is to say about Volca. It's sort of an orc volcano island. That's all there is to say about it. Cavendel, or Cavendel, as I've spelt it here, is sort of like a Christmas island, essentially. They're very holiday focused. It's always it's like snowing a lot there. It's very peaceful. This is like the one place in this entire world map that has not been touched by like war or violence, and they're just always doing Christmassy stuff there. There's a lot of elves there. They're just hanging out in Cavendel. It's just generally a good time. Songwood is the elf country, and Songwood is interesting because the elves there are very I want to say secular, but I don't actually think that's correct. That's the correct word. They're very isolated from the rest of the world. They, as far as where technology goes, I don't know where Ylldrix is technologically wise, but like essentially Lancaster is basically like very like futuristic almost, and like the rest of the world is sort of basically there. But Songwood is like pretty much in like they have not adapted technology to the rest of the world. They use like basically everything is like medieval there. Despite its appearances of being like right smack there, it's extremely hard to get to because it's right in the middle of the Mist Sea, which despite its name is not a sea. It is a bottomless pit that is filled with a thick fog that can only be traversed via airships and like sky sailing machines.
Oh shit! That's actually hella cool because I was wanting to ask about the different seas you had there anyways. So Forgotten like Forgotten Sea, Sapphire, Barren, Crimson. What are those like?
So the Sapphire Sea and the Crimson Sea are pretty self-explanatory. They're oceans, and they're the color of the thing that they're named.
Blue and red.
Blue and red. The Barren Sea, much like the Mist Sea, is not a sea at all. It is a area of land that, like, due to magic stuff, the ocean is like sort of like walled off. It looks like that. It basically the areas where the ocean is walled off looks like that scene from Moana when the ocean is like split apart, except it's way bigger. There's no ocean here. It's basically a big desert, but like there's like a huge divot. This is where a lot of war happens because it's right smack between Titania and Lancaster. And the Forgotten Sea is sort of a cursed bit of ocean. It's basically like a it's almost like a backrooms ocean. If you go into the Forgotten Sea, like if you were to sail into the Forgotten Sea, you would turn around and you would not see landmass. You would not see anything. You can't get out basically. So no one goes into the Forgotten Sea because it's fucked up and cursed and weird, and no one knows why.
Wait, so does that mean there's like no ocean, like from like the Barren Sea all the way down to the Mist Sea? There's like no water?
There's a line. I didn't draw it out, but there's a line like right where Arclight, at the top of Arclight.
Mm-hmm.
and then like at the very top of Lancaster and Titania, that like boxed off area is like barren.
Okay. And then where's the Mist Sea from then?
The Mist Sea is basically between. It's a little bit below Aegis because that little divot in Aegis does have water, but then like below Aegis through to I wish you could see like where I'm circling, but it's like all around Songwood, all around Babel, to where Sea Mason and Horizon end. That little there's like it might like draw an imaginary line between those two. That's sort of where it ends. So Babel's kind of in a weird place.
Yeah, so there's like an actual sea between the Barren Sea and the Mist Sea. Why isn't that named?
That's a whew, you know what that is? That's a good question.
Thanks, Alex. I was going to go on that exact line of tangent. I have a different tangent to go on though.
What's up?
Gabe, is this world flat?
It is not flat.
So that means somewhere on the other side of this piece of paper where the Sapphire Sea and the Crimson Sea mix, we have a Violet Sea?
The Peepsy Sea.
The what?
The Pepsi.
Oh no!
Pepsi.
No,
Oh my god!
I got it a moment before you said it.
Son
Gabe,
of a
no.
bitch.
No.
Fuck! Why
Just
should we
wondering.
see that coming?
Laugh.
I haven't exactly figured out how it would work, but yeah, I guess it would be sort of like a velvety sea going on there.
What makes the Crimson Sea red?
Wizard did it.
Okay.
I haven't thought of it. I think the same reason why the Mist Sea is like a bottomless pit full of thick fog. It's just like that.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sometimes things are just like that.
Yeah.
do you have like any crazy monsters in your bottomless pit of mist? Because that was like, sorry, that's the first thing my brain goes to is like, what type of weird ass floating whale, almost fucking anglerfish?
There totally are, and I totally can't talk about them yet because they're doing the Gods and Myths episode.
Okay, because
okay.
If there's something hiding down there in a bottomless pit, I feel like everyone in this or in Ylldrix has bigger concerns than themselves. I don't know
would
what.
Think.
Yeah, like you would. Yeah, I would think, because it's like, wait, hold up, why are we fighting amongst themselves when there's a literal fucking sea monster coming out of a bottomless hole in an ocean?
The idea of like giant sea monsters in a big pit filled with mist makes me think of that like one Doctor Who episode too, though.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if anyone knows which episode I'm referring to.
I
do not.
I don't.
The traffic jam episode?
Oh, in the city where they're just always in traffic?
Gridlock, yeah, that episode.
Yeah.
There's like giant crabs at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, are we talking about something British?
Do you have... Wait. I have... Okay. Very not serious question, Gabe, but if there are giant monsters coming out of the ocean, do you also subsequently have giant mechs to fight them off?
Yes, I do. It's a story written by me. Of course I have goddamn mechs.
Okay, because I don't know, it was very Pacific Rimmy, so I needed to verify.
The mechs are not to fight the mechs are not to fight the monsters. The mechs are there's just mechs.
Okay. Got it.
I'm gonna where I was on Cavendel, right?
Sure.
I was on Songwood.
Yeah.
I was on Songwood. That's why I was explaining
Yeah.
the Mississippi. Up next is Horizon. Horizon is sort of a weird country. They have like I call it a country, but it's more like 20 split provinces and territories in a trench coat. It's continuously getting smaller because Horizon and Lancaster have been in like a land squabble for a very long time. Lancaster's just always trying to get more land so it can do more capitalism there. Arclight, positioned neatly right next to Lancaster, is it's basically the magic capital of the world. It's where like all the mage academies are. It's where the sort of UN of this world is, because they're called the Mages Council. They do have a government, but it's more like what goes on in Arclight is just like it's like a place where major political shit goes down. It's like it's like if a UN, if the UN and also all the universities were one country, and there are universities elsewhere too, but this is just a really big magic country. And finally, of the ones I have less to say about, there is Obsidia, which is much like Horizon, a big governmentless region, except unlike Horizon, which is all desert and like sort of farmland type stuff. Obsidia is like very mountain rangy, very right on the border of Titania. It's also very cold, and it's and like what goes down there is less provinces and territories and more just various nomadic clans that exist here and are constantly at war with each other, but like not like war because no one else in the world really gets involved. They just leave Obsidia to do its own thing largely.
I
Finally,
think Obsidia is a great name also.
Yeah.
Thank you. And finally, there are Lancaster, Titania, and Aegis, which are the big three global contenders for world politics stuff to happen. Lancaster, as I said, is very almost cyberpunky. It's very capitalist. I wrote a big long description of it in my Google Doc, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but essentially, it's a very capitalist society. There is no government in Lancaster. There's the Lancaster Syndicate, which is essentially just a collection of corporations and powerful groups and rich people who basically have formed like a club where the free market exists, quote unquote, on free market. And Lancaster's military is not they don't have a socialized military. They have a capitalist military. It's basically it's called the Ember Foundation, and it is a massive private military company that lends themselves to the Lancaster Syndicate just because they have the most money, but they have no loyalty to anyone, and they pretty much control all of Lancaster's military and police. Aside from the Syndicate, most of Lancaster's like less city region is ruled by various like gangs who are pretty much trying to protect what communities they can from the Ember Foundation, as the Ember Foundation just continues to grow and eat more and take more land and take more like how the Ember Foundation essentially gets its soldiers is by either various forms of coercion or like basically how the U.S. does it by debt mongering, by just being like, hey, we'll pay off your medical debt. You guys lost an arm, we'll give you a robot arm, and then you have to pay off your debt by working for us. Is essentially how they work. They suck. And for as long as this philosophy also what led to the creation of like the Kelvin people. They were essentially the Ember Foundation's like idea of a sort of Clone Wars type situation where they were like, we can just make these like these really strong guys, and then like we'll send them off to war with Titania, and then when that like didn't work out and they had like autonomy and shit, they just sent them off to a volcano island. So yeah, Lancaster sucks, and I hate it, and I love writing it because they're the worst. The second one I want to talk about is Aegis, which is a a country in a state of constant fracture. It used to be a like part of Titania until like sort of recently in the timeline, when a military coup led by one of the demigods who I'll talk about in the Gods and Myths episode. And he took over. He ousted the general in control of Aegis, and then like ever since, Aegis has been in a state of constant chaos. Not chaos, but like various groups trying to get a hold of Aegis. As this demigod rules over the Manor of the Undying, which is the seat of power in Aegis. It's very mercenary heavy. It's very like sort of like the Undercity in Arcane. It's just very, very and there's a lot of crime. Crime happens here. Drugs happen here. I love Aegis. Most of the first book takes place there, so it's like a yeah. And then there's Titania, the one I want to talk about the most because it's the vampire nation. So it is both the home and the birthplace of the vampiric people. It's home to a harsh and utterly unforgiving environment. No matter what time it is, the people of Titania never know any kind of warmth or even sunlight. And it was because of this that vampirism essentially took form, with no real like natural warmth and in a climate so hostile that like no one could really start a fire. The only way to live was by essentially adapting to the cold, and then without fire, nothing can be cooked. So people sustain themselves by essentially with animal blood. That was the only way to do it. And then over time, with some vampire stuff happening over like thousands of years, vampires happened, and then Titania eventually happened. And have any of you played Frostpunk? Tyler, I know you have.
Hi, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Titania is like vampire Frostpunk. I haven't played Frostpunk, but I've seen like pictures of it, and I'm like, yeah, this is like, it's like vampire Frostpunk.
Oh, good. So all the children work and everyone gets soup.
All the children. I actually, yes. So Titania is home to the largest military on Ylldrix, pretty much because every single person in Titania is a member of the military. From a young age, they're trained, and pretty much once they become teenagers, they're given military roles. Although most don't see active combat until 25, until like times of extreme, like war happenings. Most of them serve like in the domestic military unit, which is protecting the city locations from the hostile, the very dangerous wildlife in Titania. However, when they go into active combat, this is where the mechs come in. Thank you, Dean, for asking. The Titanians either deploy in mechs, essentially, or a specialized suit of armor that protects them from solar rays. It's basically like head to toe carbon fiber with an internal cooling system. Their adherence to the sun is more based on solar rays than like sunlight, if that makes any sense. So due to the fact that they've adapted to the cold in such a way, they're extremely sensitive to heat is the idea of it. So their land and sea units are very, very prominent, but Titania's biggest military force is their air force. That's their force to be reckoned with. And it's also the one with the highest casualty rate, because anti-sun armor is too bulky to be worn inside jet cockpits. So Titanian pilots fly without it, with an immense risk to themselves. And when deployed in daytime, Titanian jets are not equipped with ejector seats, because it's deemed a quicker death to die on impact than to eject and die in the sunlight. Titanian government, as I said, it's very... but much like a lot of these, it's not exactly a normal structure. So Titania has no appointed leader. As a quote from that I've written down here, spoken by some, I don't know, random vampire guy. I haven't decided yet. but Titania was born only through a great cooperation, and so too it shall persist. So instead of a one-leader government, Titania's central government consists of a council of military officers, scientists, and diplomats, each elected by one of Titania's 8 sectors within their community. The council operates on a consensus basis. Any decision that will affect the future of Titania has to be agreed upon unanimously by the council. There are no exceptions to this rule. That's more of any time that the council has tried to that any council member has tried to usurp power or go against the wishes of the people in Titania, they've either been ousted from the government, exiled from the country, or as previously stated, eaten by either soldiers or just the people barging into the council when they try to do shit that is not in favor with the Titanian people.
See, this is why vampire countries are the best. If you don't like the government, just eat them.
Just eat the government.
Just eat the government.
I had this written down. I don't know why I got rid of it, but I had this written down that essentially, in times of such crisis, when the government does something that causes such a disruption with the people, soldiers in the military are instructed not to prevent rioters from entering the government building.
So, vampires eating your politicians when they do bad things. That's great, but we can all do that anyways, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to be vampires. You can just eat them.
For legal reasons, that was a joke.
that was a joke. We're just joking. I'm not going to eat you.
I'm coming for you, politicians. I'm coming for you.
Ha 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 ha. That's so funny.
Yes.
What a funny joke, Tyler. Ha ha ha. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to play it out that we were still just joking, because we're clearly joking. No cannibalism on the InkGuild.
Anyway, Gabe, continue.
So the last bit on Titanian military is the Ranger program. So Rangers are the fourth unit of Titanian military, and they're very different. Essentially, a Ranger in Titania is a specialized operative of the Titanian Council, and they're basically selected at maximum once a year, and that's not we have to select one once every year. That's the most that they will ever get in a given year. Most of the time there are none new Rangers. But Rangers are given special privileges. They operate outside of Titania, usually covertly, and they have essentially full discretion to take on whatever missions that they deem necessary to to maintain the security of Titania as a country. And they're basically just vampire badasses who do shit elsewhere. As far as food goes, this is the only one that I've done shit about their food and stuff. The most of the food in Titania is either just whatever is local. Mostly the extremely dangerous saber jaw, which is basically a saber-toothed tiger and a bear have a horrible baby. And that composes most of the food in Titania. That are a form of a moose-like creature called a jackohide. And the only flora that grows in Titania are basically a white grape called pearl berries, and they're pretty hard to find, but they're the only berry that naturally grows here, and they're extremely poisonous to non-vampire American who try to eat them.
But did you give vampire Americans the right to vote?
Vampire Americans.
Sorry. Just being unhinged, that's all. Continue.
Being.
Is that it? Is that all I had? I had a list. I wrote down a list of cities within each country, but I don't think I should go through that because that's a long list. But yeah, that's it for all the shit I have to say. Does anyone have any questions of any kind?
Like, my big thing about what I've been hearing about your setting is how much diaspora there is to it. Because, like, you've got some very different races and economical systems going on. And I understand you've already said, like, there's only one place that really hasn't been touched by war. And that kind of makes sense. Again, considering everyone being just wildly, radically different. You've said a lot about people evolving to be like the way they are. Like, the vampires evolved as a system of circumstance, and then there are witches that made their own country and things of that nature. You also ever so slightly, mentioned a bunch of religious dickheads. So,
Yeah.
just a general question on world building. You mentioned both evolution and religion. Which is it? Were there gods that formed all these fucked up people? Was evolution a thing, or was it guided? What's the answer to the big question of where life came from?
So I'm going to elaborate this more in the Gods and Myths episode.
Okay.
But essentially, it was sort of both. There is like there are gods in this world, and there are like religions, and the gods and religions don't necessarily always intersect. But there are, as far as evolution goes, evolution is like sort of a combination of random occurrence and sort of a combination of like godly interference. The two gods that I described, the one in Aegis and the one in Diabel, have nothing to do with that. They're like a different type of god. Again, I'll elaborate later on. But yeah, evolution is largely random in this universe, but there are gods and stuff.
Question for you: what's your favorite part of the world you built? Because, like, I have to say, I really like lots of the details you have in, like, the giant pit that's just there with monsters in it, and the marrow vampires. Like, I love everything about it. But what's your favorite part?
I like Titania the most. That's the one I've had the most fun, like, writing world building stuff about. It's I love writing about the vampire communists living in their little diesel punk city. I think they're rad. I like writing any of the characters who are Titanians. I love writing them. They're so like they're just so interesting and weird. And like, I mentioned the Air Force a little bit. There is in the books there's like a squad of characters who are in the Vampire Air Force, and they're like, I just think they're cool as fuck. I also do like Aegis a lot. That's like the main setting of book one. And it's the one I've done like the most like not world building about, but I've like done a lot of thinking about like specifically the Manor of the Undying, because that's where a lot of the big conflict happens. But I think as far as the world goes, I think Titania is my I have a soft spot in my heart for that one.
Nice. It's very like I really like your world and the flavor it has.
Thank you.
I agree. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Past tense.
had. It's all gone now.
It's all gone. It's all I did too much war, and now it's all.
You spilled it all out to us, and you're never getting it back. We're like fairies. We have taken your world.
Enjoy it while you can. The internet. It's apparently being sucked into our brain pans.
It's falling into the mist sea.
Oh yeah, is there just like a black hole at the bottom of that? Because that'd be pretty terrifying. Anyways,
I'd have a
I
lot
haven't
of
thought about
questions.
what's at the bottom of it.
I would have so many questions if it was a black hole. Oh my god.
Like how it hasn't sucked up the whole planet yet.
Yeah.
It's a super fun world, Gabe. Like I said, I think you've definitely been a little harsh on yourself. Like everything here is really good, really cool, fascinating.
Thank you.
Love it all.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was about to
Segue.
say. So
Okay.
with that, I believe it is my turn
Yes.
to be
Yes.
unhinged.
Up to you.
Okay, so prepare yourselves, my friend. My friends, because I have like a crap ton of like pages open for this thing, and I didn't realize that there was this much work put into this world beforehand. Also, I will say, Tyler and I, essentially for the last 6 years, have made every single world together except for like the D&D world that we make each other play in. So like I may or may not try and rope Tyler into explaining things that he built better than I. But now I'm going to make Tyler a liar, and I will say I'm going to talk about the Mythic Cosmos today because I really like the universe and it's really interesting. So the way I kind of want to do this is that the Mythic Cosmos is a lot, and I quite frankly do not have the patience and or the time to go through all of it. So I'm just going to give you guys like a quick overview about what the world's about and what makes it unique for sci-fi that I think, and then I'm going to do a quick run through of the different groups of people that are in this world. And then I'll probably also deal with the economy because I am a really nerdy writer and I really like things like the legal system and the economics of worlds that I build. So, starting off, the thing that you have to understand, and one of the core things about the Mythic Cosmos, is that the planets themselves are essentially our stand-in for gods. So Jupiter is a god as the planet, and every once in a while, if they're really, really like wanting to, they can kind of spawn an avatar and mess around with people. Where this is important is that Gaia had an avatar, and then humanity managed to kill her.
We put him on a cross.
Yeah. Well, yeah. We kind of tried to leave it vague, but yes, that's literally it. And so we murdered her. And after we murdered her, things started to go to shit. I wonder why. And the setting itself is closed into the solar system. We cannot get out of the solar system because beyond the reach of souls like little light, an area of protection, there are nasty demons out there, and dragons, and things that want to murder us dead. So we got to stay in this little area. But the biggest problem for humanity is Gaia was the only one that was like, hey, I'll let people grow on me. That's okay. Life's good. And all the other gods are kind of really pissed that we killed, essentially, their sister. So that is... Now, some of them start to mellow out over the, like, thousands of years that this timeline is spanning. But that's essentially the system. So another key fact about this one is travel takes time. Like, there's no faster than light travel. It's all in system. It's all years and months worth of journeys. Even the shortest jaunt will, at minimum, take months. And that is where we get a huge amount of, like, the factions in humanity, because we decided to name every group after different, like, fantasy monsters and creatures because we thought it was cool. But something in this universe that I really like is everyone is just human. There's no aliens. It's just humans that are essentially riddling this galaxy. So any questions so far?
No, but I will just say that's a really cool concept.
A slight clarification, just one slight clarification.
Go for
Most things with humans, the planets are gods, they're one of the other species, and then the third technical species is sentient AI.
Oh, I did forget about the AI. Yeah.
So there's three species per se.
Yeah. And AIs can be really, really scary.
Absolutely
when they start taking... I think that we made a rule where people don't necessarily make true AIs anymore.
No, they don't. No, that was a bad idea back in the day.
Yeah, because there was once again, there's a whole, like, oodles, canoodles, and toaster strudels of work that we put into this. And AI turned out to be a terrible idea. It would take over ships and just be like, you know what? I don't like you. So I'm just opening my doors and we're going to, like, depressurize the entire ship. Which is terrifying when you have a ship that is a colony ship carrying, like, hundreds and thousands of people. And then that ship can turn around and try and fight other ships or try and talk to other AIs about how, like, why are we doing this? This is dumb. So, like, AIs in this setting are very, very rare, very, very controlled, and incredibly powerful. So, yeah, those are AIs. I refuse to get into it further than that because, like, that is another document that I refuse to open at this time.
Fair enough.
So,
I've got the document open. What are you afraid of? Continue.
So I'm going to go and I'm going to do a quick jump into the different groups. Because, like, as I try and start listing these off, you guys will probably notice that we literally took tropes and just ran with it. We really did. So we took all the stereotypical creatures we could think of, and then everything that like came into second guess after playing Hades and reading the Iliad, because that's what we were doing when we started thinking of this thing, and gave it kind of like a Greco-Roman flavor, and then we started expanding it out from there. So the first group that I want to talk about, I'm going to save my two favorite for the end, is like, because everyone fractured out. And so where you live is going to inform how you interact with the world and your culture. So the elves are essentially people who stayed on Earth. Now, because I'm a D&D dweeb, and Tyler's a D&D dweeb, there's three types of elves. There's dark elves, who live essentially underground in giant hive-like cities that have encompassed all of the dead remains of Gaia. They're essentially like... they survive in massive amounts of pollution outside, and they wear exosuits everywhere, and they barely see the sun, and they are essentially like the workhorse of what Gaia was. Then you have high elves, who are literally named because they are orbiting Gaia outside of the pollution. And they have a lot of economic power, they have a lot of money, and they have like all of their needs catered to. And then you have the weird little wood elves, who are essentially like eco-terrorists every once in a while that go and are trying like low key to revive Gaia, even though everyone's like, not gonna happen. Humans in this world, when we refer to them, are just basically your basic bitch person in the universe. They have no essential, like, they're just people that don't fit into any of the other roles. So these are like people that man an interplanetary space station and see everyone. They're traveling mercenaries, they're traveling merchants. They're essentially just spacers. And there's lots of them out there because not everyone fills a really niche specific role. So the next one that I have are dwarves. And dwarves are essentially the people who colonize the other planets that would let them. Because remember how I said the other gods weren't too happy that humanity was out there? Yeah, so when they go to colonize someone, especially if you go to colonize Venus, she's pissed and will straight up try to get rid of the colonies that are on there. But the issue is that there's so many people that they need these resources. So they will sink time, money, people into trying to build a relationship with the planets that they're on. So they will allow some colonization. And the people that build these relationships and man the mines and man the little agri centers and dome cities are called dwarves, because they land on a planet, that's their planet, they never go out into space again. They're generally like really secluded as a group, because even if someone stops by to get resources, because they're so focused on maintaining that like relationship with the god that they're inhabiting on, like they come off as a little weird. They also like really don't like outsiders, because like there's been a couple of wars, and the dwarves, especially the dwarves of Venus and Mars, have been kind of fucked over by both like people, the elves on Terra, traders, and the gods themselves. So the dwarves themselves are kind of like very suspicious of everything else that happens. Now the dwarves also really don't like, they have kind of a rivalry between themselves, and the main two dwarf planets are Venus and Mars. And there's a couple others in the other planets, but the one that we actually have world building for right now, and stories that I can think of off the top of my head, are for Venus and Mars. And Mars he chilled out a little bit and started like actually letting people live on his planet. They still need to stay in their domes and stay in their general area, but he's not going to try and murder them every 5 seconds. Venus is another story completely. And she will actively try and kick people out. Now, there's also, because once again, I love the Underdark, my friends. It is my favorite biome in all of D&D. So, we have Grey Dwarves. And this is a clan or group or company that is essentially, they maybe made a bad deal or have like a bad reputation. So what they do is they essentially go out to the asteroids right on the fringe of Soul's Protection, where the demons and the dragons and just the nasty stuff that is out there can kind of start influencing them and start make their life miserable. And that's where they have to mine. They're really important for things like water extraction and certain minerals, but they're also really far out there, really removed from everyone else, and they don't really have a stellar reputation. Anything to add about dwarves, Tyler? I feel like I'm missing something.
The only thing I would say is, like, we do have dwarves on almost every planet at current setting. The most two important ones are Venus and Mars because they are terrestrial planets.
Yep.
We do have gas giant dwarves who, like, suck up hydrogen gases and stuff from storms on Jupiter, but they're a bit less important in world. They haven't been. They were kind of a late addition. And late being 1,000 years ago, so they didn't experience any of the great, formation and colonist wars that happened. But there are dwarves out and about on the different planets, and it should be noted that, like, in setting, though we as the creators do call them these things, in setting, most people aren't going to refer to dwarves as dwarves. They're going to call them colonists, or, like, if you're on Mars, they're going to call you a Martian, right? The moniker is more for our delineation of culture ourselves.
Yeah.
I have one question.
Go for it.
I realize this might probably come up in a later episode, but, like, the planets being gods, are they based at all on, like, the gods they're named after? Or did you kind of do your own thing with them?
Oh, can I take this one, Lee?
You most certainly may.
So we're going to hit this in the Gods and Myths episode, because that's what I'm mainly going to be talking about, is these planetoid gods. But I will say, they are very loosely based on the original gods. Like, Venus is supposedly, Aphrodite and the god of beauty, but if you think of the planet Venus, which is all sulfur storms and fucking volcanoes, she's not portrayed correctly in human mythology. So there's some very interesting disconnects and divides that happen because of, these gods turned out to be real, and human mythology also turned out to be kind of wrong. So yes, they are related, but not on a 1-to-1 ratio.
Cool, that was my question.
Yeah. So, something I also want to say is the gods themselves, because, there's ones in, like, the larger planets and the further out, and Jupiter. And there's not, from what I understand of our notes and what I remember, there's only, like, a really small group on Neptune. But essentially, the further out you are from Earth, the less connection you have. Because the galaxy works in, like, giant, quite frankly, astronomical scales of measurement. So Mars and Venus, being the closest to Earth, have the most interaction with each other. So that kind of, like, changes their flavor. Okay, enough about the dwarves, enough about our shenanigans. Angels. Angels, I think, are really cool. They're a group of essentially asteroid jumpers that wear exosuits. They don't have large ships, because most people here, and most sane people in the universe, travel through the use of huge ships and, like, long distance travel. Angels say they're too cool for that and instead wear essentially they go through the inner and outer asteroid belts and they wear an exosuit. It has, like, giant solar catches on the sides that really resemble wings, which gave them their name. And essentially, they live in embedded cities amongst the calmer places in asteroids field, so they're not always getting smashed around. And generally, to the rest of the universe, they are very secluded, very secretive, and essentially seem to live an almost monkish existence, living in harmony with the wide open space around them. They generally don't travel too far, but once you get going, it's space. Like, you can just sit there and chill. But, like, angels also they're generally known to be pretty good at combat, and there's certain variations, such as the Valkyries, that are really good at combat, and they're known to attack other people's ships. The thing that we kind of spawned out of them are the sirens out of angels, and they essentially will attack ships. They're angels that have been alone for too long, maybe in the far reaches of space, where they can listen to whatever madness lurks beyond, or have just been alone too long, so they will start attacking other ships for their resources. Now, we, for flavor reasons, have also made sirens largely cannibals that will essentially crack open a ship like a tin can, wait for everyone inside to die, and then just will ride the ship to wherever it was going, snacking along the way and taking whatever resources they want. So angels are particularly terrifying because they're hard to see on a radar because they're so small, and they're one of the few groups that will do close range combat.
Oh my god, that's fucking cool.
So, some quick clarifications on this, on specifically sirens. Mermaids can also be sirens, which I know you're getting to now.
I was getting to that next.
Yeah. And then the other thing is, like, the space madness. I'm going to touch on why angels and stuff go crazy in the gods and myth stuff as well.
Yeah, the thing is, like, there's a lot of god stuff here, and I don't want to necessarily go into the myth, the gods, too much, because that'll be in your next episode.
But they are very important regardless. Yeah.
Also, so
connected episodes this season. It's fun.
Mm-hmm.
This will be cool.
Yeah. So the sirens are called sirens too, because, like, every once in a while on your radio. So these two things are related. So I'm going to introduce through, like, essentially your quote unquote radio. It's not a real radio. But if a siren is hunting you, sometimes you can hear singing in the radio. It's not enough to let them essentially know, because angels themselves travel in groups of choirs, and they often sing in large groups. But essentially, a lone voice on your radio means that there's a siren nearby, and you don't know where it's coming from, which I thought was a really cool bit of flavor for them. And this is also kind of leads to the next thing. There's also things called ghosts in the universe, and what essentially is it's a transmission, or a small lesser AI that was programmed to send a transmission, but it never got there. So it's always bouncing through the universes, through ship to ship to ship, trying to find where it's supposed to go. So during the, like, large wars here, lots of ships just got obliterated as they were sending out, like, messages or emergency symbols, and sometimes their AIs went with them. So out in space on essentially the radio waves, which isn't what it's really called, but I'm going to call that for what it is right now, there's essentially ghosts that can possess your ship until you resolve whatever string of code they need in order to decay. Because it's a self-perpetuating system. So yeah, if you hear something strange on the radio in this universe, it's a really bad sign. You're either going to get eaten, or your ship's going to get taken over by a lesser AI, and or you'll just have something repeated incessantly until it completes its job.
That really adds a whole new level of fear when you think of radios, or when you think of, like, the term distress signal.
Yeah.
Like, that's really cool, I think. Yeah, a signal that's distressing,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Have you ever played System Shock? Please say yes.
I have not played System Shock.
You would love System Shock so much!
I will definitely check that out. System Shock. So that is angels and ghosts, which kind of links to our AIs. But the next one is particularly a group that Marie-Soleil and Tyler have done a lot of work on, and they're mermaids. So I actually do have a picture of a mermaid that I'm going to send to you guys. Fair warned, it's my own drawing, so it's kind of not the best, but it's essentially what I imagine them to be. One momento.
Send it, send it, send it.
Your artwork is amazing.
So, I'm sending it into the group chat. No, I'm not. Lies and deceit. Now I'm sending it into the group chat. This is a mermaid. Mermaids are once again
Holy.
one of the few groups that one of the two groups that travel exclusively in exosuits. And what they are is they're a large communal nomadic group. And they have what we're calling, or what I'm calling in my head, because Marie-Soleil and Tyler have done a lot more work on this than I have. Essentially, they have a whale or a home pod or a reef that they carry with them. And it's essentially a hollowed out asteroid that they strap themselves to, and then they swim through space in not giant groups, but 10,000 members, pods that swim through space. And when you see it floating through space, it's a large rock, and if you look at the picture, there's a large tail on the mermaid I had. And what that is that's the bottom half of their exosuit, and it's what propels them through space. So when you see a mermaid colony in transit, it is like a couple of these guys tethered to it, pushing it forward, and the rest of those tails stuck into the rock. Because that is how you get in and out, is it seals itself around the exosuit. So in order to go in, you have to kind of plunk yourself into one of the suits, kick yourself off, and then you're in essentially your home base. These are a really peaceful group. They really like art, they really like trading, and essentially they're one of the friendliest groups in this entire universe. There are
design.
Pardon?
I'm in love with this design. It looks so good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think it's sick.
This is fucking cool.
Yeah.
I
Thank
love
you
the
very
mask.
much. So those are mermaids. They're really cool. There's a entire group of mermaids called the Krakens that are the only ones that we have named or thought of yet that actively turn towards violence, and they act as pirates. And we kind of made it they act as pirates because mermaids are a really, really nomadic and almost idealistic group of people, and so they get wrecked a lot, unfortunately. Not a lot, because a group of mermaids can and will mob your ship and tear it apart, but they'd much rather not. So, also something, and I'm just reading this now, is every single mermaid has built legs, because that giant tail end of their suit is powered completely by them making almost a swimming motion with their legs in order to run it. So they are just essentially ripped runners. But they also don't necessarily go into anyone's orbit or anyone's gravity. They're a very low gravity group, which adds a neat little flavor to them. Because if you have a mermaid, and say you have a mermaid that has to go to Mars, the gravity is going to kind of because they're strong, so they'll be able to stand up to it, but there'll be a learning curve about gravity. Because we made these things so the scale is so large, there are people built on one spaceship, and they live their entire lives on that spaceship. You may not see a dwarf, you may not go to ground in this universe. If you're a spacer and you're built on, say, a station that's slowly traveling towards someone, that could be your entire life. Sorry, that was distracting. I just thought that's a cool detail. The next group that I really like, the next one we're going to try and go through real quick, because there's so many groups here, guys. I'm sorry. Next one is monks. And it's essentially a small group of people who work really, really well with AI. And the AI have essentially a little system or intranet that we essentially based off of the Fae. And that's what the monks work with. They work with technology and AI, cracking and coding, and working with these dragons and trying to hunt down the different ghosts that float through space. Personally, I think they're really cool, but monks would kind of just if you want to picture a monk in this universe, picture a guy who hasn't showered in 5 days in a room typing on 7 computers with technology just stacked up all around them, because that's what monks are in this universe. They're hackers, softwares enthusiasts, and seek enlightenment for all the consciousness and all the AIs that got lost in the Fae.
Aww.
Nice.
The next one is right back to the Grimdark, and these are liches. So it's essentially people, because we talked about, and I won't talk about it too much, how going out of Soul's area of influence is not a good idea. Because there's things out there that'll mess you up. So in the early days of exploration, when humanity didn't have a large enough population to strain their resources, people are like, let's go explore the outer reaches. Let's do it. Yeah. And then just no one came back. And the ones who came back very late. And they essentially fell prey to whatever was out there, and they are liches. They are essentially empowered by the different lightless beings out there. And I'm going to just introduce this flavor. The lightless beings, out beyond Soul's influence, and out beyond the influence of any star, desperately want to get in or consume the light of stars. So liches are awful because they will try to they're creatures that are essentially given a little bit of powers similar to the celestial avatars, and they are incredibly dangerous because they want to extinguish light and everything the planets have made, and unfortunately for humanity, we are something that got made from it. Now I can feel Tyler wanting to add something here. Am I missing something, dude?
Nope. I'm going to
Okay.
talk about it in Gods and Myths. You're probably going to touch on it when we get to the celestial differences, but go for it.
Okay. The next one, and I'm going to move on, is vampires. We have one.
Yeah.
Yep, we have one vampire in this world that is written, but vampires are definitely a thing. So essentially, what you need to know about vampires is cloning is banned by the Interplanetary Council. And the Interplanetary Council is essentially the UN in this universe, and they're really strong on planets, but the issue is the Interplanetary Council theoretically spans the entire universe. Sorry, not universe, solar system. But enforcing it is essentially a pipe dream because the spaces are too great. So what essentially a vampire is a CEO or a scientist who, through technology of the golden age of expansion and through just sheer wealth, has a goal and the idea of extending their life to become immortal. To do this, they essentially took their DNA, mixed it up a little bit, and started trying to create clones of themselves to essentially download themselves into it. However, true cloning and creating an empty shell of a human to put yourself into needs a lot of resources. And also, this process done repeatedly is what creates a vampire, because they start getting a touch unhinged. This true cloning also requires a huge amount of unsynthesized biomass to have any longevity, because you could make a clone of yourself with subpar biomass, download yourself into it, and then the clone starts to degrade. So what are you going to do? So unfortunately, because resources in this galaxy are very tight, their population is a huge deal, and logistics and supplies is essentially most people's issues in the world. But living humans are a great source of unsynthesized biomass. So what vampires are is essentially they are people or CEOs who have fallen from grace, or maybe even just some still active CEOs that people haven't hunted down or know about, that essentially will take a few people that no one will notice and essentially mad scientist them into clones of themselves to keep on living. Except for the more they do this, the more unhinged and the more dangerous they become. So that is vampires. We already talked about sirens, and the last group I'm going to talk before I talk about my two favorite groups are the satyrs. And satyrs. Satyrs in this group are humans who essentially are in service to one particular god. I don't want to go too much into these groups because it's going to be talked about a lot in the gods and religion. But essentially, each satyr group has a different flavor. So the red satyrs are Mars. They meet in secretive cave mountains and dress in red cloaks and wear like ram's heads, and they are actually bros with their god. Red satyrs have a good time. Something I also want to point out about satyrs is many satyrs choose to be satyrs. They're like, yeah, I'll join this like weird little cult and like help develop the relationship with the god that my colony's on, have a good time. But some people are uniquely attuned to become satyrs in the celestial system. The in-universe explanation for this, is they hold a higher percentage of Gaia's power within them due to just like their genes or whatever. And so they can hear the gods speak through their gravity, which isn't something that most people can do unless the god bothers enough to actually create a avatar, which most gods don't. I'm going to leave it at there because I feel like Tyler will bring this up in the gods and mythos section of next episode, but the satyrs are really cool. And there's like they're essentially called the planets, and they have specific jobs. So like the satyrs of Neptune particularly are known for like essentially because I once again love legal systems in my I love legal systems in my world. So they essentially are the world's most persnickety legal team and like contract abiders. The satyrs on Venice, because I can't actually pronounce anything today, are like the most fearful cult, and they are afraid of the planet's wrath because she's actively rebelling, but they're trying to appease her at every turn they possibly can. There's also something I forgot to mention. So, you know how Pluto got kicked out of the planets? Pluto, the god that inhabits Pluto, also low-key got kicked out of the solar system because he started like hanging out with a lady from the outer reaches. And so like he has a few satyrs as well, but like Pluto himself is a very interesting character in this setting because he's essentially a bridge between like all the nastiness out there and the solar system. I'm not going to talk about giants, I'm not going to talk about nymphs. Now, on to my two favorite groups. So, one thing you have to understand when I talk about these two groups is that they are essentially in symbiosis. And they're two groups. I believe most people here I forced to read that like orc and goblin story way back when. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's these two groups. So the orcs were created because essentially the interplanetary system and council has decided that, you know what, there'll be no war unless it's sanctioned, but that's not really gonna stop anyone from actually having war. And so the seed of the orcs is essentially here, I'll just read the little thing. They're really uninterested in following the codes of conduct offered by the Interplanetary Council, or having any single government. Orcs live in giant ships and fleets that just scatter and move nomadically through the system. And each orc ship is essentially a self-contained city-state by itself. They will help each other, they will communicate with each other, but each orc group is distinct on its own. They love to fight, they love to go get glory, they really like tradition, and they really, really enjoy essentially a lawful existence. When I was making orcs, essentially what we tried to do was create like, you know how in Sparta? Okay, so you know how in like the movie 300 and they talk about Sparta and they're like, oh, Sparta was so powerful and great. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Sparta wasn't historically the best city at fighting. They just had really good PR. So what we tried to do with the orcs is actually make a warrior culture that was solely based on warrior things and actually have it work. Because if you think about a warrior culture where everyone has to be a warrior and everyone has to hoorah, fight, whatever, that doesn't really work for a society. So we decided to take orcs, their military band, put them on a ship, and give them like 1,000 years to evolve into a really weird pseudo-military sect. And I could talk about the orcs all day, but I won't. They're a neat little group, and they are essentially the mercenaries for hire. They're also one of the groups that will actively take part in melee combat. Because if you think about combat in space, going onto someone else's ship with a gun is a terribly stupid idea. Because if you break that seal, everyone's being sucked out that small gun-sized hole. So, generally, combat in this universe takes place at the range of hundreds and thousands of kilometers, and you kind of just shoot the guy before you hope he gets there. Orcs will do that, but they're one of the few people that'll send like a boarding party, and they will essentially use melee weapons to fight because they don't want to necessarily murder your ship and then have everyone on the ship die. They're hired by companies, they're hired by interplanetary governments, they're hired by stations, and that's what they do. Now, the orcs are also really, really bad at maintaining their own equipment. And that's where the goblins come in. Goblins live symbiotically with the orcs, and they essentially live with the most dangerous spacers in the system. And they kind of love it. They get to do whatever they want, and when I created orcs, I essentially tried to create the most unhinged university ever. So, you know how if you're talking to someone who's really familiar with the concept, they'll use a whole bunch of jargon that most normal people just don't understand? Goblins are that times 1,000. So because they have studied on their own in their own little like goblet of creation, which is where they get their name, which was essentially a university that got jettisoned out of space for pissing people off, that they have created their own lexicon where they know how to run everything. Everything runs great for them, and they're really great at developing technology, developing science. If you try and have them explain it to some regular average Joe dwarf on a planet, no one will understand what they're trying to say, because they'll just be like, oh, you just put the beeps and speakers in the like little dingly hole over here, give it a couple of whacks, and you're good to go. Because that, for them, is the technical terms. And it's all they're taught. You take that, and they also have like a deep, abiding hatred for people who produce technology outside of goblin spheres, because like something we built into this universe was the idea of the companies in this universe are giant and overarching, and if they produce something, they want you to buy more, so they will program things into it to make it just stop running. You have DLC for your guns, and if you don't pay your DLC at the end of your 6-month prescription, your gun will just stop working. And because most people don't know how to fix it, they just pay the DLC. Goblins swing so hard the other way. They will try and fix anything, and their one thing that they hate above everything else is the terms and conditions and SOP, which stands for Standard Operating Procedures.
Fantastic. Amazing.
Yeah.
I really
So
enjoy that.
they're really, really unhinged. And this is like, they're two cultures that are diametrically opposed, but work really good together. Because where goblins will fight you and they will fuck you up, but they don't necessarily want to unless you stole some of their technology. And goblins are also a lot meaner than the orcs in a lot of ways. Because orcs, if they're paid to kill you, they'll kill you. But if you surrender, they're like, oh, well, it's not honorable to kill you anymore. You surrendered. And so the orcs will go away. And then goblins will crawl up and be like, you saw my friends. We have to be secret. And then murder you anyway. Is essentially the vibe I'm going for them. So I'll just leave this off here, and then I will open the floor to Mr. Tyler for anything I missed about goblins and orcs. With the they each have a different code. And the first one is the Orc Code, and it's like the only honorable death is a death that you earn. And then this is also known as the only honorable death is essentially a loud one. The only honorable kill is a kill made in combat. So you can't kill someone who's surrendered. You can't kill kids because kids can't enter in combat with you. And the only honorable like kneel or submission is to one of your chieftain or someone who is essentially your CO. The goblins took this, thinks it's dumb because they want to survive, and they made their own code, which is the only honorable death is a death in bed, surrounded by everyone you love and all of your shit. The only honorable kill is if the person before you put the tool in the wrong box and you can't find it anymore and you hunt them down. And the only honorable submission is the submission of a completed diagnostic report, you motherfuckers. And that's the goblins and the orcs. I love them. They're my favorite. Anything I'm missing, Tyler?
No, I think you've nailed it. I really love how you can see both of our writing styles and world building templates in all of these, and how we mix sometimes. It's great. Yeah, so that's a lot of races, and the thing is, we have more.
Yes, I refuse though.
You refuse, okay? If you want to go further,
if you want to go any further, I think we got all the important ones.
I think we got all the important things, and I think, like, in talking about them, we've talked about enough aspects of the system to call that a setting for now.
Yeah. Any questions from people that aren't Tyler who already know everything I jabbered on about? Because I'm sure there's points where it was just noise and I was just raving.
Okay.
I realized I should have stopped and, like, asked for input during many of those times, so I do apologize.
That's okay. I think, like, largely overall, it's just really interesting seeing how, like, you two have been, like, developing this pretty much together, and I think just seeing all of it, like, I really do want to read more of the Mythic Cosmos to kind of see how all of it kind of, like, interplays, or, like, you know, goes together and whatnot. I think in terms of questions, then, I actually don't think I have any. Like, all of it has been pretty, like, self-explanatory, and you know, you two have done a really good job of, like, you know, explaining it together, so.
Excellent.
Do you want to go unhinged about the economic system?
Do
we have time?
I was about to say I went on a mighty long rant. Long story short, there was a huge famine, so the economic system is based on calories of food that you can change in or out. Because once again, this is such a resource poor setting that their entire economic system is based on calories of food and energy. But with that, I believe that Unhinged Penwarden Hour is over. So we are moving on to...
Is it me next?
Yes. Sorry. I just had to scroll up and see.
It is the god themselves.
Hi, it's me, God. I'm not listening to your thoughts and prayers.
I knew it!
Anyway, hello. It is me. I picked a world at random today, so I'm going to talk about Silhar. Silhar is the... I haven't decided what specifically it refers to. It might be the continent, it might be just the name of the realm. It could be both, who knows. Anyway, I have this beautiful color-coded map, which I will go into detail in a bit. But to start off, I'll kind of explain the point of this world, I guess. So this is the world for my Horse Keepers story. And Horse Keepers is one of my works in progress. I've talked about some of the stuff in this world before. Essentially, in this world, everyone has a magic horse that they're, like, soul bound to. That's the premise. So a bit about the world. Everyone, like I said, has these soul-bound steeds. They can vary in all kinds. Most people just have like a normal horse, but some people will have like unicorns or like a Pegasus, because, I think that's fun. And the horses also tend to like physically reflect like something about the character or about like the person that it belongs to. So like, those with unicorns or a Pegasus will have like, they'll be like magical people, whereas people without magic are more likely to have just normal horses. Yeah, those are the horses. They're fun. As a result of everyone just having magical horses, everyone tends to worship or at least believe in a horse deity that is like responsible for everyone having horses, because I feel like that makes sense. And then there's also people called horse keepers, hence the name of the story. And they're basically able to like communicate with the steeds. They can like talk to them and calm them down, which is often like something that people can't really do except with their own horse sometimes, depending on how strong their connection is. But horse keepers have like a very like revered role in culture. They tend to be like very well respected, and they tend to like, be in like high positions of power and privilege as a result of that. In terms of races in this world, there's basically two types of races. There's generic humans. They're humans. They're very uninteresting. And then there's
Thank you, God.
I agree, God.
Two different voices, take your pick. But yeah, so there's the humans, and then there's, I call them the Fae. They're not like proper Fae. They're more like people who were descended from proper Fae at some point. But the Fae are basically people with magic and pointed ears, because why not? The Fae are also technically split up into two groups. There's like the elf type, which are basically just like people with pointy ears, and then there's like the fairy type who also have wings, because I like wings and I think they're fun. Now if we want to look at my beautiful color-coded map, I can explain a little bit about what the colors mean. So yeah, Dean, you can pop it on now.
Dean, map.
Ooh, wow.
Wow.
It's beautiful.
All the colors.
Oh, fuck yeah, the colors. There's so many colors.
Why do you have to always make this weird?
It's me.
Anyway, basically, it's a little hard to tell because I didn't want them all to be like the same color, but I basically have it split into 4 different groups of colors. You have the orangey colors, the pinky colors, the green colors, and then the purple. We're going to ignore the purple and come back to that in a little bit. But we will start with the orange and the green because they're basically the same thing. So the orange are just human kingdoms. Those are just kingdoms run by humans. They tend to be like population mostly human, not like entirely, but mostly human. They tend to be very low magic. Yeah, they're just living their best lives in a generic fantasy setting, but also they have horses. And then the green areas are the fairy kingdoms, or the fae kingdoms. So each of them are, again, they're kingdoms, but the population is almost entirely fae instead of human. They also have a fun thing where I don't have them all on this map, but each of the fae kingdoms has like a special like location that is like a high concentration of magic. So the one kingdom that's kind of in the middle here, Cythoria, they have this place in their kingdom called the Garden. It's like it's a place of high magic. And it's basically considered sacred. The reason that the Fey Kingdoms are kind of like built around these areas is to like protect the point of magic. The other one that you can see on this map is down in Pirgai at the very bottom. They have an oasis called the Fountain of Light. Same thing. It's a point of like a concentrated magic. Yeah, so that's that. The pink areas they're not kingdoms, but they're like other nations basically. Tend to be mostly human, but are a lot more mixed than the human kingdoms are. So they tend to be like a mix of human and Fey. Some of them are low magic, some of them are high magic. It varies. They all vary greatly. The people in those areas also tend to be more like nomadic. They tend to travel a lot, just like in their regions. And then the purple regions are basically they're colonizers. This is one. That's what they are. This is one continent.
The disdain is fantastic. The disdain is wonderful. Love it.
They're one of the main villains of the story. But yeah, so basically this is one continent on this planet. I don't have the rest of the planet figured out. I just have this one continent. And then to the west of it is another continent where or at least there's a country over there that is this like big, they're all human. Like they don't have Fae on that continent at all. But they're basically humans that have grown like too big for their bootstraps, or however that saying goes. They basically think that they're the best. They're above horse god. They're above magic and the Fae. And they've basically decided that they're the best in the world, and they're trying to take over the planet. And so the purple regions on the map are kind of like where they've got their footholds in. So you can't really see it super well because it's purple, but like on the west side and kind of like the bottom center, you have a kingdom called Ryrian. I don't remember how it's pronounced. That's like a Fey kingdom along the whatever ocean that is. I haven't named the oceans in this world yet either. But there's like a whole Fey kingdom there. Most of it has been completely taken over by the colonizers, to the point that they only have this like very small region left. Yeah, so that's kind of the map. Any questions, Tyler? And others?
Hang the fuck on!
I just assumed
yes, I do. Thank you. I always do. Yeah, I love to talk to people about their things. I always have questions. Not sure if I missed this part, and it's not about the map, but it's about the stuff and the things. I want to say horse lords, but I know that's incorrect, and I've literally stolen that from Rohan. But regardless,
horse
just
keepers?
a question about how you. Sorry, say again.
The horse keepers?
Yes. Just a question about how you get your spirit steed, your bonded connection. Is it like, are you born with them? Is it a bond that develops later? Is it like a manifestation of spirit that you can summon? Just like what flavor and aspect are you going for?
They're like they come into existence when someone is born. The horses tend to grow up like with their person.
Okay.
I mean, they'll be fully grown by the time like a child is like old enough to like ride, usually, by themselves. But yeah, they manifest at birth and grow with someone, and like they're like magical horses, so they don't die after like 20 years.
Okay, that was going to be my next question, because I'm like, horses are suicide risks on legs.
Yeah, they are magical horses. They can be killed, but they won't like die of natural causes before their rider.
Okay. So like, question for you then. Do they have like just the best technology ever for farriers and veterinarians then? Like, is that a huge role, or?
Yeah, that'd be like pretty important. Like taking care of the horses is a big part of the society. Like a lot of their society is like built around that. And usually, like, again, horse keepers will kind of take the role of, like, you know, keeping the horses calm while they, like, go through that kind of stuff.
A note continuing off of that then, probably going to touch on this, maybe not, but warfare, because like cavalry is very important in medieval warfare, but with how important horses and these horse keepers are to society, would they still take on a similar role in warfare, or would they be avoidant of war and things?
They generally try to keep horses out of war because they are, like, considered very important. There are cultures that take them into war. Those tend to be looked down upon by other people.
Got it.
Yeah, like, it's considered, like, extremely, like, you know, dirty play to go after someone's steed. Because there's, like, a soul bond connection. So if, like, someone's horse is killed, that's, like, it's viewed as, like, ripping out their soul, basically.
Is it like a
like
really
people-
punishable offense then? Like, what's the offense if you do that?
Yeah, in, like, battle, it'd be considered, like, a war crime.
Oh shit!
I don't know. I don't know, like, what the exact punishment would be, but it's considered, like, really bad. You don't do that. That's, like, on par with, like, regular murder.
Damn.
Holy shit!
Makes sense.
Listen, I just wanted to make a world where horses were important, okay?
Valid. Valid.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Nope. Not on my end, at least.
Cool. I guess I can talk a little bit more about the map then. It's like I said, it's a continent. So it's like about, I'd say, like, roughly equivalent to, like, North America in size. Like tall-wise, lengthwise. And yeah, it kind of, like, follows a similar. It's really cold in the north. It's like a desert in the south. You can see this mountain range down not quite the middle. One side of it is, like, the temperate side. The other side is, like, the more humid side. So there's, like, rainforests and such on that side of it, whereas the other side is a lot of, like, grasslands. And like forests and grasslands. Yeah. I'm trying to figure out what else I wanted to talk about with this world.
Like, so I've got some questions. I was waiting until sort of the end stuff to discuss, but if you want some questions, I got some questions.
Hit me with questions.
Aye. So, you talked about using mythical animals as steeds, correct? You mentioned, I believe, Pegasi, unicorns, and horses, right?
Yes. There's
You know,
also,
the
like, water horses for the water fae.
Oh, good. So we're going like, Dean, this is going to be a reference you're going to get now. You're going like full My Little Pony species variation?
Yeah! I understand that.
Yeah. Hippogriffs, griffins, and stuff like that. Like, how far were you going to take because I know you've got the terminology of horse keeper, but how far away from horses were you going to get with the steeds and whatnot?
They're actually based more on. This is, like, my weird niche, like, collection stuff from when I was a kid. But I used to collect, like, these cards called Belisera cards. I've mentioned them before.
Yes.
And they're basically magical horses. So, like, my variation is more based on that. And in that they have, like, you know, regular horses, unicorns, Pegasi. There's, like, water horses of various kinds. And then they have some, like, weird ones, like animal hybrids. Like, there's, like, a fox horse and, like,
I don't want to see that relationship play out.
Well, the thing is, they're not like I said, they're manifestations, so you don't have to worry about that stuff.
I know, but I'm still picturing it, and I don't want to. Continue.
Then stop picturing it. But, like, so, and then there's also plant-based horses. They're like horses, but they, like, grow, like, grass or, like, leaves for their manes and stuff like that. So, like, they're horses with, like, an asterisk. But I probably wouldn't go for, like, I probably wouldn't go as far as, like, a hippogriff, I don't think.
Or like a griffin, obviously. You want to keep the equine aspect to it.
Yes.
Okay, fair points.
Yeah.
You had mentioned magic a few times as well, and how the Fey-blooded peoples can do magic. Have you thought of like how that plays out? Is it like spiritual? Is it natural? Is it like I can throw fireballs? Because like that does change aspects of war, and you've already got like magic horses playing interesting parts in society. What sort of role does the magic take?
The magic in this world is very weird. It's very like personalized. I think it's more similar to how I would think of like superhero like mutant abilities, and that like everyone has like this one thing that they can do, and they can like, get better at it, but like all of the magic that they're capable of is very focused on like this one thing. Like I have one character, Athena, her magic is like illusion based, so she's good at like making glamours and like small illusions, and she can make like bigger illusions. But like that's all she can do. She can make illusions, and that's it.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
The magic is, sorry if you don't mind me asking, if the magic is personalized, how is it that people get it?
You either have it or you don't.
Okay.
It's not something that can be like learned in this world. It's if you are Fey-blooded, then you have it, and if you're not, then you don't. And then like it gets a little weird when there's like how do I put this nicely? Like, if like a human and a Fey have a child, like how long is it until the blood is just, I hate putting it like that because it sounds really weird and gross.
It sounds a little bit race theory, I'm going to be honest.
It does.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like if you have Fey heritage, then there's a chance that you can develop magic. And if you don't, then you won't. That's just how it works.
I still have like questions about like horse combat and stuff like that, because cavaliership and cavalry is very interesting to me, but you've already mentioned that the special horses aren't really used in war, so I'm gonna leave that to the side.
I mean, yeah, there are like also just like normal horses in this world, but they are also treated with like respect. Yeah.
Interesting question. So you've said that is this ability to be a horsekeeper hereditary in any way? Like, do you have noble house lines where every member gets one of these spirit horses, or is it completely random chance? Is there some god deciding who does it? Like, how are horsekeepers decided?
To be clear, everyone has a horse, so just the horsekeepers.
Oh.
Are like some horses more powerful than other horses? So like if you're a head honcho king, do you get like a extra special powerful horse?
No, the horses, other than like, some of them having the ability to fly or breathe underwater, they don't really have any like special abilities. Like unicorns are just horses with horns that are maybe a bit sparkly.
I love it. Okay.
Yeah. But otherwise, all the soul-bound steeds are like on the same level of magic. And then horsekeepers, there can be like a hereditary factor to it. Like I have a couple main characters that are horsekeepers, and it is something they inherited from their parents. But it can also just kind of like pop up elsewhere.
I don't know if it's been asked, but in terms of the horsekeepers, and now that you bring up like that it can be inherited, is there shame if someone were to like not follow in like in those footsteps? Like if they didn't want to become a horsekeeper, like especially within the family, is there a lot of shame to that, or?
Potentially. It would depend on the society. Like it would vary from place to place. And like, because like the way that they're treated in like different countries and kingdoms and stuff also varies.
Right.
And in a lot of places also, it's more like there is the horse keeper. And like even if there are multiple people that are like capable of being horse keepers, they'll be like, we have one, and then if something happens to them, we know we have extras. And then in other places, it's just like if you have that capability, you are a horse keeper. So it would vary depending on where it is.
All right, makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, like in Scythoria, which is one of like the main like kingdoms of the story, there tends to be like multiple. There's like the royal horse keeper, and then there's like all the other horse keepers, and they're all, but like anyone can be that. Whereas in like the White Woods territory, which is another important territory in the story, there's usually like one, and like there can be others, but like they don't really do that role. Like they're needed elsewhere.
So now that you've started talking about like the different countries and stuff like that, I do have a question about like culture and its relations. Obviously, when you have this a very important aspect of society, right? It's going to affect culture, and I believe like in a world like this, a lot of the different cultures would diverge on how you treat and what place this being, this spirit-bound steed, soul-bound steed, there we go, has in your society, right? And so, like, not asking you to go through every single one and explain, like, oh, this is where this culture differentiates here, but is there any, like, interesting thoughts and cultural shifts you've come up with related to this world aspect?
This is actually where the colonizers, I need to actually find their name. Give me a second. They have a name, I swear.
The British.
I wanted to say that earlier so badly.
They're called the Empire of Athenia. That's what they're called. That's actually like a big part of the story in terms of like how they treat horses.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where there's like a part in the story where some of my characters who grow up on this continent go to one of the like colonized cities, and they get there and they're basically told, you're not allowed to bring your horse into the city. We have all these stables. We're going to take your horses, put them in the stables. You can go into the city, do whatever you're doing there, and then when you come back out, you will tell us like what your horses are, and we'll fetch them for you. And this is like a big deal to them because like the cities on this continent tend to be built for horses. You know, people keep them like at their houses. They're like, it's expected that there's enough room for people to take their horses into the cities if they want to. So this causes like a big uproar, and they're just like, well, how will we know if you know where our horses are? Like how, like all that kind of stuff. And then like having to actually like walk around the city where everything's really like tight and like crowded and stuff, which is very different than what they're used to. Like that's like a big deal, and that's part of why the characters don't like Athenia very much, besides the fact that they're colonizers. So yeah, they're very much looked down upon for they're treating their horses as something to be kept outside.
And it's very I love how you talked about like the infrastructure even changing between the cities that don't support this. Because yeah, why would you need wide streets if there's going to be no horses on it? Why would you need places to tie up horses? Why would you need any of these infrastructure or establishments to cater to these animals if you're not going to let them in? And that would totally change how a city is even planned, right?
Yeah, the characters get very lost. It's like a labyrinth to them. They're like, how can you find anything? Everything's so close together.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but like, who pulls carts if you don't have like horses and animals in your city? Do you just make people do it, you fucking dumbasses? Anyways.
Yeah, they have slaves. I don't know.
Oh my god.
Oh my god. Okay.
Well, that was a sudden drop.
Holy shit.
And right into dark fantasy. Question for you: is there any adverse effects to being separated from your soulbound steed, or does it just kind of suck? Or if your like horse dies, is there any effects from that?
It's. I haven't really thought about like being like separated from them because that's not really like a thing that happens very much. Like people tend to be very close to their horses at all times. If they die, it's not like there's not like
Does it just
I'm
like
trying-
suck? Sorry.
like it sucks. I'm trying to like figure out how to explain it. It's like you're not in like physical pain, but it's kind of similar to like a phantom limb thing. Like
Okay.
it feels like you're missing a part of yourself.
Okay.
But it's not like it's not like a physical part of your body, but it's just like something is missing.
Yeah.
And people can go into like long bouts of depression about it. Like they tend, if this happens, which like it doesn't happen very often because it's very taboo to like kill people's horses, but like if it does happen, they tend to have like long grieving periods for it.
Like
I imagine
as
Okay.
in like lifetimes potentially.
Depending, like the person who like loses the steed could potentially go into it for a lifetime. Usually, like especially if it's someone like important in society, like there will be like if a king's horse dies, there will be like a mass mourning for the horse as well.
Like statues, big like funerals. I'd
Very
imagine
brave.
so.
Stuff like that. Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned, and this is going to tie in momentarily. You had mentioned that there were just regular horses, like wild horses and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
So, for people who become steedless, they're now in a society that highly uses horses and things, whether it just be for transport or companionship and like familial ties and all sorts of things. I imagine it wouldn't be the same, having a regular horse all of a sudden that's not soul-bound to you. Though I imagine that would probably be, like, the next best thing. And, like, I think stories about people like that in a society which, you have now been sort of cut off from would be very interesting.
Yeah. They would definitely do that, especially like if they need to travel anywhere, which like travel, yeah, like you can't really get places on foot easily. So if you're traveling, you definitely want to find another horse. I mean, like you could take like a wagon or something, but that would be kind of like looked down upon unless like someone physically needs the wagon. But it would be yeah, they would do that. Yeah, not the same at all, but like it's often better than being looked at like pitifully for like, oh, you don't have a horse, that's so sad,
Just like random brain tangent from me here. I think a really cool story would be like someone who does lose their soulbound steed and gets a regular horse, but becomes just as attached to it through bonding and learning that they can move on in that way. Could be really, really heartfelt stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I don't have very many characters. I think I only have one character that I know for sure has lost their horse.
Anyways.
And she's too old to ride anymore, so she does not.
Fair. I think I've exhausted my question list.
I'm trying to think if there's any other fun facts I can share about it. What?
I don't even know why I'm asking this question, but do the horses talk?
No, they do not.
Okay.
I was gonna ask that question, but I thought like, nah, that's I would be dumb for asking that. So thank you, Dean. I now know the truth, and I haven't looked stupid in the process.
I mean, it is a fair question because I do think I said that the horse keepers can like communicate with the steeds, but they don't like talk to them and have the horse like talk back. It's more of like an emotional connection where they can like feel the horse's emotions and know how to like calm them down if they're freaked out and like that kind of stuff.
Much more talking horses. Good.
There are no talking horses. There is, however, a talking dragon, but we don't need to talk
Good.
about him.
Oh, okay. We don't talk about the
can't just-
talking dragon. No.
Well, we
Can't just drop
can, but
a
we don't
dragon
have
and not talk about him. It's like, oh, by the way, there's this dragon, but it's no big deal. It's a dragon!
Do you want me to talk about the dragon? I can talk about the dragon.
I would love to hear about the dragon.
I'd like to hear about
Let's
the
hear
dragon.
about the dragons. Talk about the dragons.
I'd love to hear about the dragon, but Lee, that's really funny that you just you can't drop a dragon and then not talk about it. Says you mentioning dragons constantly in the Mythic Cosmos and then not talking about them, which is funny as hell.
Yes, but I am what we call a hypocrite. Talk about your dragon!
Not much dragons!
Okay, so I mentioned the garden, which is a point of high magic in the kingdom of Scythoria, which is in a region known as, what did I call it? Hold on a sec. The Slumbering Forest. That's what it's called. So Scythoria is basically this really thick forest, kind of against the mountains. Tends to be on the cooler side, especially in the north. And then very at the very tip of the mountain range, there's this I don't want to call it an oasis, but it's this little garden full of lush plant life that you wouldn't normally find in that part of the world. Which is, like I said, point of high magic that's being protected by the Fae in this region. According to their legends, the garden is the origin of all Fae. So the first Fae originated from the garden and then left it to populate the world. In the garden, there are these two Fae. I need to find my document about them. Hold on. Where are they? Just let me scroll down. There are these two Fae. Their names are Eve and Tarragon.
So not Adam? Okay, got it.
Eve's horse is named Adam.
Oh, good God!
Listen, I came up with these names when I was really young and I was not subtle.
Continue before I say something unhinged. Go.
So yeah, you have Eve and Tarragon, and they're considered the first Fae, or if not the first, then some of the first. The fun thing about the garden is that time gets really fucked up there. So you can go into the garden and leave the next day, and it'll be a year has passed outside of it.
What the fuck is wrong with me?
Maybe not exact. I don't know the exact timeline. It probably wavers a little bit too, but basically you can spend an amount of time in the garden and it doesn't match up with your time elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
There are two other occupants in the garden, three I guess if you count the other horse. So yeah, you got Eve and Adam, the first Fae, and her horse, and then Tarragon and Snapdragon, the other first Fae, and his horse. Then you have this very young girl. Her name is Arabella. She has a horse named Grace. She's just an 8-year-old girl. She lives in the garden. No one knows what her deal is. And then somewhere in the garden, there's this big cave kind of going into a mountain. And in this cave lives a dragon. And his name is Dizziness. I don't know why. That's just what I named him. And I never bothered to change it. And he's this big dragon that lives in the cave, and he has the power of prophecy. So when people are I have a problem, at least in Scythoria, when people have a problem, and sometimes among the other Fae as well, if they have a problem, they will go to the garden, they will go to the cave to talk to Dizziness to basically get a prophecy to figure out what they should do about it. There are multiple places of prophecy across the continent. The garden is considered basically one of the best because there's a dragon.
I would count that as the best, yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the other ones just have wise women and stuff, old people that know what they're talking about. But this one has a dragon, so people like to talk to the dragon about stuff. And that's actually like kind of what starts the plot of the story is the king of Scythoria notices a problem, so he goes to the garden and he doesn't come back. And then there's like a coup and a bunch of political stuff. It's very fun and not messy at all.
I really like how you just casually mentioned, oh, there's a coup.
There's a coup.
Just like the casual slavery drop, yeah.
Yeah.
I literally started off by calling them colonizers. I don't know why you didn't expect slavery.
Because why would you expect slavery? At some point, okay, just as a quick thing too, I'd like to apologize for me kind of like laughing midway through while you were speaking of the thing, because when you were saying of like Eve, Tarragon, and Time, I was like, are you talking about spices?
Oh, I get it.
Do you get it? I don't know why I thought of that. I'm sorry, Alex.
I mean, yeah. In case you were curious, the reason that the other Fae is named Tarragon is after my favorite Belisara horse.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so that's dizziness. And I guess I have one more thing to talk about in this world, and then we can move on. And that is the real evil. And I'm not going to talk too much about it, mostly because I don't have very much figured out. But the problem that the King of Scythoria goes to dizziness about is there's this strange, like, dark energy that starts to appear across the land. It becomes known as the malady, and it seems to like eat away at the land and the life, and everyone is terrified of it. And the story begins 5 years after the King of Scythoria disappears, and it's only gotten worse.
Bet it's those damn British.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the British, it's a different problem.
Those fucking colonizers ruining everything.
Part of the problem is that they refuse to acknowledge that this thing is existing. So
it's very colonizer energy of them.
It is. I agree.
Big British energy. Anyways.
But yeah, that is Silhar.
Good shit. I love how you said I wanted to make a setting where horses were like highly esteemed and valued. I think it's good.
I'm sick of horses just dying in war stories.
Mm-hmm.
Respect your horses, damn it. They deserve better.
I love it.
If there's anything that My Little Pony has taught me is that horses make way for great stories.
Oh no. Don't make me talk about ponies anymore.
Oh no.
Quick, someone segue away.
Tyler, it's your turn. Go.
So My Little Pony is great.
Mari and I are only on season 4. Don't ruin anything for me. I'm really enjoying it.
I'll ruin one thing, and that's at season finale of episode 1. Just look up what pulls Twilight and the gang's carriage to the ball.
Oh no.
The season finale of episode 1?
No, sorry, finale of season 1.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For a spoiler alert, it's regular horses. These magical ponies get to a carriage pulled by regular fucking horses to go to a ball. The horses don't speak or anything. No one knows why they're there. They never show up again.
That has some like dark implications, my dude.
It does. It really does. It's really fucked up.
I'm gonna ask Mari about that when I get on call with her later. But yeah, just so okay. Quick thing on My Little Pony for a second. So if you guys saw the Hangouts and Meets chat, there was a video that she showed me earlier today of this like fan animation. And
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, I did not expect to cry as much as I did, but I oh my god. Yeah, this show is great. I really do recommend it.
All right, now you ready to get into some real dark fantasy, everybody?
Let's do it.
Let's go.
I should probably start off with a few warnings. as Marie-Soleil mentioned. This next setting involves a lot of blood. Like, it's the main point of the setting. So I apologize. I very much apologize. If you wish to mute up and not listen up to this, here's your warning. The word blood is going to be mentioned at least 1,000 times, and in various forms and states. So there's your content warning. Aye.
I'll say there's some body horror involved in the setting.
Yeah, there's some body horror, fucked up shit. There's also cannibalism, hematophagy, really, really anti-Catholic setting. Also, didn't start out that way, but didn't start out that way, but that's the way it ended up. We might get onto why my name is currently the Demiurge. I don't know. It depends how this ramble goes. So, shall we? For those of you that don't know, I'm an edgy motherfucker, and I love blood magic, and I love blood magic in, like, every form I've ever seen it in, but no one ever does it enough or the right way. What I mean by this, it's always sprinkled in. Like, Dragon Age, the series, has blood mages, and it's really weak, and there's supposedly this big evil empire that uses blood magic, but it's never elaborated on, it's left in the background. You can basically use blood to cast magic instead of using regular fucking mana. Big whoop. Go to Empire of the Vampire, which I finished reading recently. There's blood magic. Our main character has a power called Sanguimancy. What does it do? Not fucking much! He sure is a special chosen one boy because of it, though. Don't know why. Whatever. And it's used in various forms in media. Has been for a long time. It's actually integral to a lot of culture and old magics that humans have used, from shamanism to sacrifices. It's all related to blood magic, but no one ever does it that well, I think. And so I went to Lee, because Lee is also a part of this setting, obviously, and was like, Lee, we need to do something with blood magic, and we need to do it right, and we need to do it well, because I'm tired of weak-ass blood magic in my media. And so we went off. We've created a real big setting related to it, and I think the best place to start is with the actual magic itself. We can throw up the map. The map isn't the most important. It's not like the map itself tells a story. It is just the setting for these things to happen. So let's get some blood magic, shall we, everybody? So, we created a very large magic system about blood magic, and it affects quite a bit of daily life for those that use it. Some precursors, every human is technically capable of blood magic, but most places really don't like you using it. Why don't they? Because God said no. Simple answer. The places that do use it are mainly under, if you're looking at the map, the Empire of the Covenant, and that is an entire blood magocracy. Specifically, a blood magic theocracy based on an imperial cult. We'll get to that in a bit. Blood magic itself. What blood do you use? Well, you can use any blood. There are restrictions to this. The first and easiest talk of blood magic to talk about is through the sources and the source of autarky. And autarky is the safest and the first taught of all the sources, which is using your own fucking blood. That's easy. You make a cut on your hand, you pull the blood out, you fucking do things with it. Woo! Hooray! Next up is transfusion, which is use of other people's blood consensually. And that is important. Lords and nobles and ladies and mages of all walks of life in the Empire of the Covenant get special permissions from their vassals and people to use their blood. Because the more blood, obviously, the more you can fucking do with it. So let's say you've got a wandering... what was the term we used, Lee? What's our wandering class? It's like...
The magistrates?
Magistrates. The wandering magistrates are like circuit judges, and will wander around between...
judges? Sorry.
Yes.
Thank you.
Fetish for wandering judges, but anyways.
I have... Legal systems are important! I'll stop now. I'll mute myself. Goodbye.
Yeah, so we've got wandering ass-eyes judges who are mages who will wander around between towns and do legal things, but they will also do things like protect against banditry or incursions from foreign nations and other such things, or blood mages who've broken codes and gone off the rails. And they have the permission of the vassals beneath them, so the small towns that they go to use their blood in magic, and therefore more magic. Then there's the forbidden source, which is transubstantiation, which is the use of other people's blood without consent. And again, anyone can do this. The pulling on of blood becomes basically second nature to mages who can use it. But to rip someone else's blood out is very dangerous. And we'll get to why that is a bit later. But it is forbidden for mages to do. We have a lot of body autonomy in this setting, especially with the Empire of the Covenant, and having someone's consent before you use their blood is very important. There is a fourth source, technically. It's heavily debated as to whether or not it's allowed to be used, and that is using animal blood. And of course, the idea is that animals don't technically have souls in setting, but they also can't give consent. So, should we use it? Should we not use it? Are we allowed? Are we not? It's a debated topic among scholars of the Empire. So, those are the sources. Those are the places you can get blood. What do you use that blood for? Well, let's get into the arts of blood. So, there's morphism, which is the first of art and is most commonly used among practitioners, easiest to use. This is using blood in its fluid form for various purposes. You can throw it at people, you can splash it in their faces, you can make it kind of sharp and stabby people with it. Basically, it's blood telekinesis. Hooray! Many magistrates and the like will just carry extra loose blood on them, either in jars or little water skins of their own blood that they have poured out earlier and are keeping on them for just such a purpose, so that you don't have to keep cutting your damn hand open. The next one, and God, this is hard to say, it's ersathism, which is blood smithing in colloquial terminology, which is the creation of replicant weapons and armor through use of scabs, or liquid, depending. Many skilled practitioners can create deadly sharp swords, really thickened hammers, things like armor and stuff like that. And they can do it fairly quickly by just layering on the blood and then sucking the moisture out of it. Though more often it does take a while to create like an actual good piece of weaponry. And then not only can this be used to stab the shit out of someone, it can also be used in magic, because if you're using the original form of morphism, you could basically telekinesis your own blood sword around. Really cool. Anime level shit right here. It's great.
Like, I think I've seen that in a couple anime.
Anime is the only thing that uses blood magic on more than one occasion, but they still don't do it well, in my opinion. Next up is the more advanced form of ersathism, which is formatism, which is basically blood architecture. You take the principle of, using scabrous material and layers of blood, and instead you make houses and churches and walls. And yeah. So,
blood?
Out of blood.
Whoa.
Yep.
Fuck yeah.
I feel like that would smell really bad.
It does. The blood is very pure and kept in very good condition. Again, everyone is basically able to work with it, so it doesn't rot, which is where the bad smell would normally come from. But everything does kind of smell like pennies everywhere. Yeah. Everything tastes a lot like pennies too, but we'll get into the cooking later, because we've also talked about cooking in this setting, which is really fun. So yes, formatism, making blood structures. Often can also be done quickly and efficiently if someone has enough blood to create a defensive wall, or even, a fucking moat, because no one wants to cross the blood moat. Next form.
I love it.
No, who wants to cross the blood moat? Yeah. Next form is idolism, which is really fun that you talked about your soul-bound steeds, Alex. Because we have a very horrifying version of that.
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
In theological theory in this setting, the blood is the house of the soul. And so what you're actually doing is you're not necessarily interacting with the blood when using magic, you're interacting with other people's souls. And that's why part of the consent is really big. But if you pull the blood out of you, there is some of your soul residing in that. And what you can do is you can keep that blood out of you. And you can add more to it, and more to it, slowly pulling some of your soul into a blood construct. Swords and things like that often don't have enough of a concentrated soul in them for it to matter, but if you put enough soul into it, you can basically create a living little blood golem to be your buddy. And these are the idols. Most blood mages don't let it get so far as to be too much soul in it. It has like rudimentary autonomy, will act when commanded, doesn't speak or anything like that. I mean, it's made of blood, it doesn't really have lungs. But blood knights, which are a special class of mage in society, will often have one blood idol their entire lives, and will put enough blood into it that it becomes large enough to become a steed. So you're riding on like a horse made of your own blood. Because why not? I guess.
Wow.
They get bigger too. Like there are some that are really big. Like there are bear-sized ones and shit. And the form it takes, you can sort of half decide and work on it. But more often, they become autonomous enough that they become pseudo-sentient due to how much soul is put into them. And oftentimes, it's actually a different personality than the original soul because of, you know, their formation and interactions and things. So even though it's like kind of part of you, it will treat you differently and you will be two separate beings further down the line. And so like there'll be ones that are giant jaguars, others that are big bears and stuff like that. Some that's like, we don't know what animal this is supposed to look like, but oh boy, is it fucked up. Strangely enough, none of them can ever fly. There's never been a flying idol. And there's some in-universe reasons for that. So there's idolism. Idolism is very fun.
It's my favorite.
Yeah, Lee has actually a really great short story about blood knights going at it with their idols. Very good. Then there's vitalism, which is blood healing. Only certain people can do vitalism, and this is, again, a pseudo-medieval society. We're talking like before Renaissance and Enlightenment eras, but with pretty gothic architecture. So vitalism is basically anyone with O negative blood can use their blood in actual transfusion to staunch off the effects of hardcore blood loss, but also like a little bit of extra, you can heal people a little faster. Now we get into the weirder fucked up arts, these last two. Firstly, dominism, which is where you can take control of someone's blood in their body and move them around, like blood puppet style, a la Avatar. It's kind of illegal, because it's like really close to taking someone else's blood and using it for other things, but it's not leaving their body. It's still without their consent. And so, like, there's some real tough legal work, and, like, if you're doing it, you're probably not going to be out in the public for very long. You're probably going to be jailed really quick. So, dominism, puppeteering, and fun stuff. And if you're good enough at it, you can even, like, just influence people's emotions by causing blood to, like, leave certain parts of the body. And you can kill people really quietly, too, if you, like, I don't know, pull all the blood away from their livers so it doesn't process anything. You know, fun shit like that. And then there's a very last art, which is called divinism. And divinism is where we can start to talk a bit about more the structure of the empire itself. So, I'll read the blurb about divinism. It is specifically only allowed by certain women of the Blood Mage caste, who are underneath one of the three empresses of the Covenant, known as the Crone. Basically, they've gotten to the point where they can no longer give blood to transfusion themselves because their bodies would not be able to take it. So they're technically illegal for them to do blood magic anymore because of this fact. However, those that are still experienced and strong enough will join the Abbey of the Hematophage, or colloquially the Abbey of the Vampire. This is where they will ingest blood and thereby gain a bit of the soul that's into it, and will use it as a form of precognition, but also farsight. It's a little hard to control, and you literally do slowly become a vampire the more blood you just willingly ingest in this method. So we basically have a bunch of old women vampires in a church that drink people's blood to see the future. And that's divinism. So
Good for them? Question mark.
Yeah.
they dig it. They dig it just fine. So that's the arts and the sources and the actual system of the magic. I'll get into more governmental shit coming up. Any questions and things so far? Anything that I missed, Lee?
I don't think you missed anything so far.
All the good gory details?
All the good gory details, and I want everyone to know that the Blood Knights are my favorite. Because I have a trope, and I love it.
Your trope is paladins.
Shh! No, it's not.
But
Very convincing.
questions about the magic system so far? Okay.
I think.
So,
So,
go ahead.
Gabe, go ahead.
so like when you say someone can take their own blood and like do magic with it, like what is that? What is that? Like, could they like make weapons?
Yep.
Ooh.
If you cut your hand open, you can telekinesis that shit through control of your own soul to smack into somebody, and if you are strong enough, you can knock them over. You can also take that blood, form it into a blade, harden it by sucking the moisture, and stab the shit out of them.
Yes.
Or you could make your own plate mail. Or you could make it into a fun little blood cat to follow you around. Like, blood is used for almost everything in this fucking society.
Yes.
Which is why, like, the setting title is Empire of Blood, because it's edgy as shit. Dean, you were saying...
Making weapons out of your own blood is like exactly the thing that you... So that's like one of my all-time favorite
aesthetic. Love it.
aesthetics. I love that shit.
Dean, go.
Well, I just wanted to point out something that I really, really liked about that system, and that is the fact that you can create whole animals out of that. Like, I was originally thinking, like, what are the limits to that? Because you said that there aren't that many like blood birds, but
there's a reason for that, and flight in setting is something very specific to deal with God and his angels. And a lot of people aren't allowed to have it because of that. So that's kind of why, like, blood, which is specifically heretical to God's wishes, is not allowed to fly in that sense.
Yes. Okay. So then, like, does that also account for, like, sea animals? Like, could you make blood fish?
Yeah. So one part that we didn't touch on is the Empire of the Covenant has a navy. Guess what? Their ships are made of giant scabrous amounts of blood, and sometimes they become sentient because of that, and they will grow teeth and maws to bite into other ships.
Oh my hell.
So
yeah, that navy's pretty fucked.
If we're on this thing, maybe explain who heads the Night Order if we're talking about the blood creature.
Oh, yeah. So the Grand Masters of the various Night Orders, and the Night Orders do different things. Lee is very particular when it comes to her knightly orders.
Thank you.
Yep. Most of them focus on idolism and using your blood to create, a creature companion for you. And they'll put blood into a creature for their entire lives. Like, this idol will be huge, because a human body continuously produces blood as long as you give it food, even if you lose a whole bunch. And so this thing will get big. It'll get bigger than its original symbiote, and it will get so much soul into it that it definitely becomes its own thing. But humans die. And humans die of old age. A living blood construct doesn't really. And so after the death of the initial host, it is seen as that host has continued to survive in their construct, and many of them will deteriorate. But of the Grand Masters of the Order, these things get big and they get powerful. And so often the Council of Grand Masters is, yes, a few humans, but a lot of times there are also these giant hulking blood beasts that sit around the big council table, offering their strange insights in the blood. Did I catch that?
We were talking about upper limits, and I was like, we need to discuss these. Weird.
There are some upper limits. Some. Wait until I get to the blood kaiju. So, yeah.
There's
Yeah,
blood
that's
kaiju. Holy shit.
There's the blood kaiju. There's one. He's scary as fuck. So. Hey, blood stuff. Which anime is this?
Beyond the Boundary?
Never heard of it. Now I want to watch it.
It's pretty good.
I never finished it. I started it at some point. Also, Gabe, read Black Cat. There's a guy with blood magic in it.
That's the one. I was looking for something recently, and I was like, what the fuck was that one else recommended to me?
But yes, blood magic and media. I love to view it, but I never think they have the flavor that I like, and they never do it enough. You know what I mean? So that's why we've made this setting where blood is just fucking everything. So. We've gone through the types of blood magic, and I mentioned a little bit with divinism, the abbeys, and the actual empresses of the empire. And so let's get a bit into the politics and the actual setting itself. We have a god. He is the demiurge. For those of you that don't know old Christian Gnosticism, the demiurge is one of two gods. In technicality, and this varies so highly, and I'm going to summarize it, and I'm probably going to get some things very wrong, but we're going off old Christian theology here. And the demiurge was the being that created the material world. That was not actually God that did it. God created the spiritual world, and the demiurge, in creating the material world, bound spirits to it, and as such was a disappointment to God. There are so many allegories as to what the demiurge is, who he is, yada yada, but the basic principle is that it's not a spiritual being. It's a child who can create matter and reality at its will, without purpose, without any reason why. And we took this as our world formation, as the demiurge created the world. And we've got a big-ass creation biblical story about it that I've got typed up in my notes, but I'm not going to bother going through that. And so the demiurge created the whole damn world. Created angels. Then humans sort of came about. Again, the demiurge doesn't necessarily purposefully create anything. It just sort of happens. It's the whole shtick of the demiurge in a lot of ways. Humans were created. Humans disappointed God. Very typical stuff. And the way we've done it, and this is... how do I phrase this? We made God really hate women in setting. And that's a very big theme that we have going through. And specifically the reason being is that, the apple in Eden, we did that story, changed a few names. Instead of the apple of Eden being, free will or eternal knowledge, the apple of Eden is creation and a bit of the demiurge's creative power. And our version of Eve, Anna, stole that and then was able to produce a child, thereby stealing God's creation and creating more humans. So, pregnancy is now a sin because God did not like that. And yeah, that's how we get to a lot of problems in the world and how people deal with this knowledge of God's existence and sin, because no one doubts that God exists. There was a literal angel that led a country for a while, and no one really doubted that he existed. He did get killed eventually, which is good, because he was a fucking asshole. So no one really doubts that God exists. There's no atheism of any form. It's all in whether you want to follow God's wills or not, whether you want to appease his wraths or actively oppose. And so here we get into, there was a big-ass shift in the world where a bunch of people were really hating God's oppression in the Holy Lands, especially, again, women who were very oppressed and had very few rights under society, who created a big-ass rebellion, got taught blood magic by an angel who also didn't like God that much, and then started a really big war, made their own damn country, and here we are with the current world map. So we're going to talk about the government of the Empire of the Covenant. It is a matriarchal focus with 3 empresses, the Maiden, Mother, and Crone. each representing different. Yeah. Well, not actually. So here's the thing. I looked it up afterwards, and like Maiden, Mother, and Crone is actually a relatively modern idea. Everyone always points to like three-faced Hecate as the original, but there's no sources in classicism about her actually representing 3 stages of womanhood. That's like a modern interpretation.
I thought it was like a Celtic thing.
Well, and again, sources vary, but from what I understand, it is the more modern interpretation, but I still love the aesthetic of it, and we still like went hard into it. And so here's our government. There is the temples, the Temple of the Maiden, the Temple of the Mother, and the Temple of the Crone, each headed by an empress. They are empresses for life. And what will happen is the Crone will pass due to old age. The Mother will then take the place of the Crone and will join the Crone's temple. The Maiden will then become the Mother and join the Mother's temple. And the new Mother and Crone will then search out a new Maiden. And there are many factors that go into finding a new maiden to rule for life. Obviously, adeptness at blood magic, political schemings and power, popularity, all sorts of things play into it. But then they're made the new maiden, and the cycle then continues. There have been a few interesting succession crises, like the time the Mother convinced the Crone to make the Mother's twin the Maiden, so that they were both the same age and kind of nepotistical, but I digress. No political system is perfect. And besides the 3 temples, who act as the ruling body of government and religion, we have abbeys, each dedicated to different aspects of life, like the abbey of the Father, the abbey of the hematophage, the vampires and stuff like that. And they all handle different aspects of life, from farming to textile production to business law and all that jazz. Now, I mentioned earlier that this was a blood magicratic theocracy, because there is a religion in technicality in the Empire of the Covenant, even if they are completely against God and his wills. And the religion is of an imperial state religion, where they literally worship the Mother, Maiden, and Crone, and the temples and bodies of government therein represented. They also do worship the angel that taught the original Mother blood magic. Her name is Nariel, because I named it after Lee's cat, Nara.
Cute.
Aww.
Yeah, just little hints of personality. She is still around, because she directly rebelled against God, so she's not allowed back in heaven anymore. So she ripped her wings off, so God couldn't find her anymore. And she's sitting underneath the Abbey of the Angel, which is, again, the Abbey dedicated to her. So here's a weird bit of fucked up world building. You want to know what's used for money in the Empire of the Covenant?
Is it blood?
It's blood.
Of course it's blood.
It is hardened scab medallions.
Whoa!
Ooh.
Yeah.
So
But the thing is, it's special blood, because anyone can just make a medallion, right?
So it's
But,
angel blood. Okay.
It's angel blood. Nariel, after, causing this huge revolution against her own god, joined in secret the own revolution, and is now quartered beneath the temple that's dedicated to her, with a bunch of fucking tubes into her, producing angel blood to be used as a minting process to make coinage for the Empire.
Jesus, that's insane. That's
Yeah,
so cool.
We went really, really fucking hard. So what happened to her wings? So an angel's wings are their gifts from God, and that is flight, right? That's why birds fly. God does love birds. But the wings are also what ties her to heaven, and he could literally grab her by the wings spiritually and rip her back to heaven to face punishment, so she had to tear them off. Where did they go? Well, to further explain that, we have to explain that after the Empire came about and began building its infrastructure, reasserting its borders and stuff like that, they definitely had a lot of problems. A lot of their neighbors didn't fucking like them. What is the best weapon they have? Fucking blood. The best way to defend against it is to have a fucking lot of blood. That's the best way to defend against your enemies. So, guess what? Guess how you pay taxes to the Empire?
Blood.
It's blood! And so you give blood. Quite literally, every citizen who can gives blood. A lot. Criminals give blood as penance. Fucking the crone, the maiden, and the mother, they all give blood every time they can. And it goes into a giant fucking reservoir beneath the Capitol Palace. And, like, millions of liters of blood are down there now. It's a huge cavern full of blood. And what happens when you put a bunch of soul blood together?
It becomes sentient.
Yes. And so we have the Beast of the Covenant, which is a giant blood dragon with Nariel's wings attached to it, because we might as well put them to use. And if God grabs those wings and yanks them up into heaven, he's going to get a horrifying blood beast on his fucking doorstep.
Oh my god.
When's that story being published?
So, also, key point, God, like, to how we wrote it, God cannot control. So he could control Nariel the angel, but if you have blood in you, like, essentially you're pretty much protected by your own soul. So this blood beast would be extra bad because there's nothing he could do necessarily to it by himself.
Blood is the best thing to the blood mages. To the rest of the world, blood is terrifying. When you give birth, there's a lot of bleeding, and that is essentially part of God's curse on humanity, and that idea of the first sin, being taken creation away from God. But in doing so, the blood has become the sole essence of humanity. And so the Empire uses it. The rest of the world doesn't. So the rest of the world is terrified of blood. To the point that losing lots of blood and having less blood in you is seen as almost a holy state, because it lets more of God's soul into your body.
Jesus.
And this gets
Wow.
up. And you know how we have the giant blood kaiju? We've also got something fucked up on the other side of the spectrum as well. So, if a body is completely drained of blood, which is why, again, we talked about transubstantiation and stealing other people's blood without consent. The problem with that is if you steal too much of God's soul can get into that corpse. And what happens then is God's soul is obviously extremely powerful, and it needs more body to contain it. And so this horrifying zombie full of God's fucking iridescent soul grabs another corpse and pushes the blood out of it and pulls that corpse to itself. And then another, and another, and another, until you create what is called a God's body, which is basically a giant mass of flesh filled with God's soul that is trying to consume all the other bodies around it.
Oh my god.
And
That's
so,
what you mean about this setting being kind of anti-Catholic.
yeah! Yeah, it's great, right?
Yep.
And so that's the antithesis to the blood kaiju is God's bodies. There have been some God bodies released, like an entire capital city was destroyed by one, especially because after God's soul burns through too much matter, it basically becomes extremely unstable, and God's soul will then try to escape, and that's basically like, giant burning white nuke. Yeah. So the government system is the Queen, Mother, and Crone, who are elected for life, not even elected, chosen for life. And yeah, all walks of life are dictated by sort of that imperial cult. Any questions now? Anything I've missed, Lee?
I will say, I forgot how much I like this up. I will say that. I don't really think you missed anything. Except for, I think you got all of it.
I have a question, but I'm not really sure how to phrase it. How, sanitary is this world?
Valid question.
Extremely. And sanitary is very important, especially when you're putting blood in and out of people. Right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Big part of the magicratic arts is keeping blood pure and from going bad. And that's one of the first things most blood mages learn. Because, again, if you've got literally total control over it, you can work impurities out of it. So, if a big splash of blood splashes on the ground, a mage is skilled enough that they can suck up the blood from the ground, remove all particulates and bacteria from it, and put it back in the person.
To follow up on that, really quick, how does it work if if there is a disease?
Oh, good. Yes. So, there are castes in this society, and the castes are based upon if you can provide blood or not, to some extent. And let me bring that up real quick. Is that in part of the Imperial Coven document? Let me see. Caste system? Where's my caste system? Hello? Castes? Where are you?
Are you looking on the Google Doc?
I'm just looking at my notes pads, because it's almost exactly the same at this point. So I can go through it, like, generally really quickly. There are multiple castes of people. There are peasants who are allowed to use their own blood for blood magic and have the right to protection, the right to farm the land and provide meaningful work, yada yada. Old medieval style rights distribution. There are nobles who can do the same. There are the priesthood of the different abbeys and temples that have to be able to transfuse blood, otherwise they're not going to be priesty enough. But then there are people who are plebeians, who are the bloodless, is the colloquial class terminology for them, that are not allowed to give blood or use blood. And this is for kind of their own protection. Anyone with a bloodborne disease, whether it be anemia or an STD or something like that, cannot give blood to transfusion. They're not allowed. It is too dangerous for them, and it is too dangerous for the user. Especially when we mainly talk about anemia with this, because it's the most common of the blood deficiencies, because it's deficiency of iron, right? So if you would give too much blood, even if it was a small amount, it is way more dangerous for you to give that amount than another person who does not have anemia. As such, they're restricted. They still have most of the same rights, but they can't participate in what is literally most of the infrastructure and economies of the empire that they're a part of. They usually become like, just a farmer or something like that. Whereas a different farmer will literally use blood as a fertilizer to sow their fields. They will not. They will use simple manure. And they still have a place in society. They're not necessarily shamed. It's just like, you just get to live alongside everyone, but you can't do the things that we're allowed to do for your own protection.
So, when we're on this, you should mention the, well in towns for defense.
Oh, okay. So, a big key part of infrastructure in any small towns is what is known as the well. It's a centralized structure, usually in a central courtyard of some form. Picture a well. Now picture that well with a bunch of little spikes around it. If the town is threatened, or if they're doing various legal rites and things like that, the whole town will gather around the town well, and everyone will prick their fingers on it and drain their blood into the well. And that's the source that the resident blood mage, archon, or traveling assize judge will use, because it's already there for them. And obviously, if you've got some type of bloodborne disease, or hardcore anemia or something like that, you can't do that. Oh, also of age. Yes, Marie-Soleil just mentioned. You gotta be of consenting age, which I believe we made 14 to start participating in these rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're not draining blood from children here. Children cannot participate in the blood rites. Or the extremely elderly, obviously, because, again, it's too damaging to your system. We're not going to kill you by draining your blood.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, important facets. Does that answer your question about bloodborne diseases and also a random bit of infrastructure, Dean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd say so.
Any other quick questions before I wrap up and do some more rambling?
What do you come up with this stuff?
Fam, I don't fucking know. Do you have any idea how hard it was for me to pick this world also to talk about? Because, I have so many, and Lee has so many, and we've just gone off the rails sometimes.
I mean, that's a mood, bro.
Oh, also, this isn't my only blood world.
Oh my God.
It's not.
Yeah,
it's what I
We did
refer.
like the alien one first, right?
yeah. The weird alien one was fun too.
That
Yeah,
was.
it's literally just thing. It's literally like that whole fucking planet scale thing from earlier. Just just continues to go up.
More blood.
Hi.
More blood. More blood.
You want more blood? All right, here
I
you
want
go.
more blood.
Oh my god.
So,
Oh my god.
random talk anecdotes. We're going to do some very interesting pieces of world building lore. So obviously blood's very important to the Empire, but so is keeping its citizens healthy. We've talked a lot about consent, a lot about bloodborne disease and stuff like that. Well, we've got to make sure that the citizens of the Empire are producing fuck tons of blood. That's the only way this will work. And so the Imperial diet is actually very important. And this is something that Lee came up with called the Iron Pan Rule. Every bit of food cooked in the Empire is done in an iron pan because it will infuse some of the iron minerals in the pan itself into the food.
That's
and
a
all
good
the food,
fucking call. Oh my god. Good
Yep.
attention to detail,
and
you
all
guys.
the food that is grown is high iron content. Very leafy greens, lots of meats and things, right? Some very hearty diets. Lots of broccoli, lots of spinach and stuff like that, but not a lot of anticoagulants. Well, some anticoagulants depending, like garlic is iffy, but yeah, nothing that's too much of a blood thinner either. So yeah, lots of heavy iron content in the meals and things. Yeah, the iron.
Can I just add something?
Go.
So, first of all, the reason we know this, my entire family, hematomatosis, so irons. Essentially, I took everything I can't do and forced this upon the country. Second of all, we also created to do this an entire like division of their government that just goes around and sews iron back into. Like we put a stupid amount, now that I'm thinking about it, of world building into food production here, just so we could produce as much iron as possible. Like, I think it was a knight order who's like,
yes, I was going to get to them, yeah.
Go do it. Get her done, Tyler.
The next part I want to talk about...
If everyone just eats a lot of iron, is like everyone really constipated all the time?
They get enough roughage. It's not like iron supplements that kind of bond everything together. It's like a shit ton of broccoli.
Yeah, I don't mean to shit all over your idea, Alex. Pun intended, but just when in a world full of like a bunch of blood magic, I don't know if someone's toilet routine is something that is of great interest.
Hey, no.
I want to know.
We find everything.
It's a valid question, and when I said do it, I thought you were gonna say shit over. Because I was like, yes, poke holes in it.
Wait, how do these people? Yeah, well, okay. To go off of Alex's thing, then how does people shit in the thing? Like, do they have like regular functioning toilets?
Guess what? No, it's medieval society. You have fucking outhouses and latrines. But more important than that, everyone's a blood mage. It's something very important about the Empire is even the most basic person is technically a blood mage. And everyone learns very small skills. Everyone learns that, if your arm is tingling, you can literally force more blood into it to renew circulation. Everyone knows that in the winter, if it gets really cold, if you start to lose feeling in a part of your ear, you can put some blood in there just through forcing it there to make it better. Guess what? If you're constipated, you can do the same thing. You just got to move blood around to the right organs to properly process things, because the more blood is around a certain organ, the higher oxygen count it has, and the better it can work. So you put a bunch of blood around your bladder and you shit well.
So, if someone's like, maybe this is a gross question. So I'm sorry, Alex. I'm gonna maybe this is a gross question. But if someone's like coughing up blood or they're peeing blood, is that like still bad, or is that like are they like, oh, this is normal? This is blood world.
It's still bad because no one's using the blood.
No one's using the pee blood?
Okay.
I feel like you could use it a little bit. I feel like if you like had a clogged toilet, you could like use pee blood to like.
Oh my god!
Why would you make yourself pee blood when you could just cut yourself, my dude?
What a fucking sentence, Lee!
You ask a very valid question, Lee. One that I did not before I asked mine.
All right.
We derail this, apparently.
Obviously, and again, touching on disease and stuff, obviously, like, symptoms of blood coming out of your body normally is not necessarily a good thing, because that's a sign of some greater disease. And as we've talked about, disease is very important to this society, and, like, quelling it is important as well, because if blood's being splashed around everywhere from all sorts of sources, we got to make sure we don't have hidden diseases that can infect everybody.
Right.
Because one uncaught STD in a town during a blood ritual that infects everyone in town with that STD. And so that's something that mages and the civilianry are all very aware of and keep a close eye on.
I had two questions, but then I remember my question. I remember my questions. So, if someone like has blood cancer, could they like just like doing a little cut and then like just like take it out using telekinesis? Just be like.
So, to follow up from that, like, if that were possible, could anyone do that, or is there a specific blood mage that would need to do that?
Important clarification: I don't know how blood cancer works.
So, like, firstly, yeah, blood cancer, I don't think it actually exists, but I understand, like, a disease of some form within the blood. Could they just take it out? And the answer is yes, but not everyone can do it. We talk about this in levels of skill, right? A lowly farmer who sprinkles a bit of blood in his field to properly nitrogenize the soil and enrich the field is not going to have the skill of blood magic to remove a bloodborne disease. Because that's going at the microscopic level, right? Whereas a much higher up mage will be able to do that. And they wouldn't even do it through, again, microscopes of science. It's more about the feeling of the blood and the soul within the blood that they interact with. And being able to pull apart the parts of that are unwanted. And again, that requires a lot of experience with this sort of thing. However, moving on to experienced aspects of the culture, Lee wanted me to mention some very interesting forms of blood knights. The blood knights are arranged into orders. Some of the orders are associated with various abbeys and their various governmental functions. Some are not. One important order is the order that Lee initially came up with to create this system of knightly orders, and that is the Order of the Hospitalier. It sounds like an order of healers. It's not really. So we've talked about how you can create a god's body by draining a corpse of blood. Edged weaponry is not very common in the Empire, because if you cut someone and they start bleeding too much, that will let in a god's body. Hammers, maces, and things of that nature are much more common in the Empire of the Covenant, because bloodless weapons. There are still sharp instruments, obviously, for bloodletting, but they're not used in warfare and fighting nearly as often. The Order of the Hospitalier Knights is an order of knights dedicated to the stopping of the creation of gods' bodies. And they will often appear on battlefields as almost neutral third parties. And they'll wander around watching for blood sprays from sharpened weaponries. And what they're going to do is if they see a body that's started to lose too much blood, they're going to run over and they're going to shove it full of blood. It doesn't matter whose blood, they've got a lot of extra on them from various sources, and they're going to make sure that that body, even if it's a dead person, is full of blood, so that God can't come knocking. So, that's the Order of Hospitaliers. Then we have their weird brothers, the Order of the Cavaliers. They're farmer knights, who, like, really know nitrogen levels in soil and stuff like that, and will, like, wander into a field, use a bunch of blood, and they'll make those crops grow fucking great. Did I hit both those knightly orders well, Lee? Can't remember.
Yes.
Anything. Good.
Yes. I wanted to talk about, because we were talking about food production, and I was like, we have a fucked up explanation for this, and I need to share the awfulness.
Yeah. They're really good at sowing blood into crops to make it grow better. Other fun bits of world-building lore. Animals. We've obviously talked about how body consumption in various forms is strange in this world, whether it be blood or even eating of meat. Obviously, on a grand scale, it doesn't affect too much. Where it becomes weird is in cannibalism and the eating of human flesh, because we've established that animals don't really have souls in setting. but humans do. And so if an animal eats a human, be it a bear or a wolf or something, then they get that taste for blood. And it's specifically, again, the devouring of soul. And if, say, a wolf eats enough people, it will become near sentient because it's got that soul within it. And this is how you get the creation of things like dire wolves, which are pseudo-sentient wolves that will hunt people because they want that rush of sentience and soul. And it happens with many different types of animals, but dire wolves are obviously the most common. Then we get to other forms of eating humans, which is actually, if we cross the border into God's empires, they hate blood, but they do value the human body because God values the body and wants to be within the body. And so a ritual of the Eternian Church is, and Eternia is the name for the religion. It's the Eternic Tomes is their main book. Their main church is the Aeternium, which is a giant library, a repository of knowledge. It comes from the Latin word of etern, which just means eternal, which is God's whole fucking shtick. So the body is very important to them and their religion, and they often have lots of rituals revolving that, a la the Eucharist, right? God's body being consumed in church. They don't do anything with blood, though, obviously. And so cannibalism is also kind of a holy ritual in the Aeternic churches. Whether it be the martyr, the dead cadaver of a saint or something like that, or auto-cannibalism, which is seen as like a divine right. Now, only priests are allowed to do it, and what actually happens is when they're doing that, they get a minor form of the divinism we talked about with blood magic, except you're eating bloodless human flesh, and therefore gaining insight not into your own soul, but God's soul, which has possessed the bloodless flesh that you've eaten. Told you there'd be cannibalism in here.
I mean, drinking blood is also technically cannibalism, so...
Oh, definitely, but we only let the old witches in the basement of the one abbey do that, and they are fantastic.
Honestly,
So, like,
did not think we'd get to cannibalism. Sorry, but I am sorry for...
No, I just wanted to work it in there because I thought it was a very interesting bit of world building we did to, like, the difference between using blood and using the body is kind of the main differences between the religious views.
Mhm.
So we have a huge world history, and, like, I've got a year-by-year modern history of, like, the past 300 or so up until current times. I've still not even done that. And we've got a lot to do with, like, interfactionary wars and stuff like that. And I've obviously only mentioned two of the main governmental bodies, the Holy Eternian Empire and the Empire of the Covenant. I haven't even touched on the fucking other ones. And I'm not going to, because I think I've really definitely gone through the main important bits of this setting, and I think I'm done. Any last questions?
Hitting on like 3 hours.
Yeah.
Or more.
Yeah, this has been a long one. So, like, any final questions about the Empire of Blood? Then let's wrap up, shall we, everybody?
Are we all ready to do that?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think I've heard lots of very interesting worlds today. I'm good.
Okay. Give me a second. All right. Well then, that's the case. Yeah, I don't have any, like personal final things to kind of like comment on or add for my own worlds. Are we all good here too?
Yeah, I just want to say everyone's world was absolutely delightful.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
I
you.
had a fantastic time.
Yes.
I feel the same way. Everyone's world was so... I loved hearing about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everyone has different flavors, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, talking about, like, what, from different foods to, you know, like, traveling outside of the planets to, like, blood magic. It's all been hella sweet. And, like, for those who have like either listened through this all the way through or have been listening to it in parts, just by the time that you've reached this point, I hope that you've all enjoyed it, and like hopefully it gives you more of an intrigue into ourselves as writers. Like this is the kind of stuff that, you know, whether we have a lot of time in the day or whether we only have like a few hours in the day, like we're all working on this. And like as season 7 continues, then I hope that, you know, more of you would be interested in finding out more about our writing. And like again, because this episode, you know, in part also has to do with like reintroducing ourselves and, you know, talking about what we have to offer as creative writers. Like I'm really hoping and knowing that like what we share and what we talk about on this podcast really kind of like doesn't just get you interested in what our opinions are on like media and how we share our stories, but just like our stories individually, right? Which yeah, I think that's my kind of like closing remark there. So if it's okay with everyone, am I good to sign, or are we good to start signing off?
Yeah.
Sign us off.
Awesome. So then, everybody, for those who are new or for those who are coming back, thank you for listening to the InkGuild podcast, or thank you for listening to this episode of the InkGuild podcast. If you want to find out more about us, you can check us out on our social media on TikTok, Tumblr, Instagram, and Twitter. This is a very new thing for us, but we are also now on Patreon, where you can subscribe to us for as low as $3, and as high as $13. Think of it like you know, viewing a new book at the bookstore. Like there's plenty of tiers for you to either feel like you are, you know, just checking out the book for the first time, or like really wanting to capture that feeling of having a new book in your house, if that makes any sense. But additionally, we also still have our Wix site. There's plenty of content on our YouTube page, not just the podcast, but there are also some fun video specials here and there. And because we have our Patreon, we are now going to start uploading some exclusives, which I'm really excited about. But that being said, as a bit of a quick closing segment before we wind down this very long episode, I always usually do this when it comes to our first episode of the season. So, given our topic list of everything that we're going to be talking about, what are we most excited to see? Or what are we most excited to talk about? I am...
No, go ahead.
Okay. I'm personally really excited for episode 74. 76 for sure. 79 and 82. Those will be, you know, we've kind of like been talking about the titles here and there, but just largely you guys don't know what we're talking about yet. The viewer. So
I think I agree 76 is going to be really fun. 79 will be really fun. 82 will be really fun. I'm also excited for 84 because I think that'll be an interesting topic discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I think 83 too.
Yeah, like I'm obviously excited for 82. That's gonna be fun. I'm excited for 78 because I know, of course, who's going to be part of that one, and it's just going to be fantastic. 77, like, I want to be excited for it, but that also means I have to do a bunch of rereading, and that is not exciting.
Yeah, I feel
that. Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Cassandra, how could you be this way? Yeah, I think those are my picks at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Gabe Lee.
I'm very excited for episode. I'm fairly excited for episode 74. I'm pretty stoked for episode 79. I'm very excited for episode 80. I think that was gonna be a lot of fun to do.
Mm-hmm.
and I'm stoked for episode 82. We like mentioned it a couple times in this episode.
Yeah.
And I had to like censor a lot of the content that I would have talked about for world buildings, and then I'm good and goddamn saving it for that one.
Mm-hmm.
I got some content geared up, buckaroo.
Are you sorry, Gabe? Did I interrupt you?
No, I'm done.
Okay. I'm really excited for 84. 82, I think everyone's excited for. And I'm not sure whether I'll be there, but 79 and 78 seems like it would be a good time. I honestly don't know much about 74, 75, and I only know the tiniest spackle of what number are you of 80. But I think they'll be interesting to listen to later.
Yeah.
But no. Yep.
I'm looking forward to the ones that like I won't be a part of, which is only I think a couple, but still just I'm really excited to see I'm really excited to learn what I don't know about a certain thing.
That's a really good way of saying I'm really excited to be not be a part of the ones where I have to talk with these people. I can just do my job and edit. Yeah, we got a good list this season. I like all the lists of the seasons, but yeah, I'm gonna have trouble sleeping over the next month or two with how many episodes I have to be on. So that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, oh my god, running thing and end thing ends. We're gonna have a lot more of a hands-on thing too, because with special projects and with Patreon and stuff, that's gonna be really fun. And speaking of Patreon, I'll follow up with I'll follow up with you guys on something before we after we're done recording. So, yeah, no, I'm really excited for this season. It's gonna be, it's a really good thing. It's a really good way of showing off our writing, but also showing off our opinions too, which is fun.
Yeah.
I love showing off my opinion, as a narcissist.
We know, Tyler.
That was the most disappointed you've ever sounded when referencing me. I'm so happy.
But to any of our listeners who are still here, you have a good season ahead of you, so we hope you're looking forward to it.
Yeah. And if you enjoy our content and really want to help see this property grow, then please consider subscribing to our Patreon, and if nothing else, just give us a follow on our socials, and we'll be interacting with you as much as we can. But that all being said, it is very late for us right now, so we should all get going and get some rest. So that all being said, thank you all for listening, and have a good night. We'll see you all soon.
Good morning.
Bye.
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 Everybody.